Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the What If guy, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If issei Weilded Mjolnir's power. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. A man with black hair, around 26 years old, could be seen chopping wood with his bare hands in a peaceful forest in Alaska. He carried the wood over his shoulder until he reached a cabin. Issei reflected on his past, acknowledging that since leaving his old life behind, he had achieved many things through hard work. He hoped his tranquil life would continue without disruption. Meanwhile, in another part of the world, in Japanqua, many people were gathered, engaged in a serious discussion. Draig announced that they had found something significant. Michael expressed frustration, noting that it felt as if the world was conspiring against them. Azazel mentioned that he had sent several of his men in search, but they had found nothing. Yasaka shared her disappointment, stating that she had sent her best trackers, yet they were unsuccessful. Odin lamented that his daughter still harbored resentment towards him for his past actions, driven by pride over an achievement that was not truly his. Ajuka revealed that since the truth had come to light, he had endured Sikvera's sorrow and had to intervene to prevent her from taking drastic actions due to guilt. Red admitted his own share of guilt, recalling how his pride as a dragon god had led him to make unforgivable choices, and he would never forget the pain in her eyes. Ophis, too, expressed her regret for her actions with Red, acknowledging the consequences that followed. In the center of the table lay a green sphere, within which a dragon lamented abandoning her beloved and fighting companion, all in an effort to reclaim her title, only to end up alone. Several women around the table wore expressions of sadness, having forgotten their true love and replaced him with others who turned out to be mere survivors of chaos. When they sought to return to their beloved, they found he was gone, leaving only a note that expressed his anger and disappointment. More than 10 years had passed since that day, and they continued to mourn their foolish decisions. Irina, Gabriel, Griselda, and Maria had all fallen into despair, having betrayed the one man who loved them for who they were, not for their appearances. They searched for him in every possible way, but to no avail. Rias attempted to use pawn pieces to track him down, but all they found were 8 scattered pieces and 2 spheres, 1 purple and 1 red, representing the powers of Red and Ophis, reducing Issei to a mere human. Their suffering did not end there. Over time, they bore children with those they had chosen, some deciding to care for them, others abandoning them in orphanages, while some chose to terminate their pregnancies. They felt tainted by their actions, and when Issei discovered their betrayals, they could not help but cry at the pain reflected in his eyes. Now, in the present day, they continued their search for him, as a new threat had emerged with the goal of destroying them and freeing the Trihexa from its prison. The new leader of this group was Anastasia Lucifer, the granddaughter of Rizavim Levon Lucifer. A pure-blooded demon and descendant of the original Lucifer, she was also the sole bearer of the Alaster sword, once owned by the ancient Lucifer, and possessed greater power than her foolish brother, Vale. Their meeting was abruptly interrupted when a soldier burst in, sweat dripping from his forehead and breathing heavily. Draig demanded to know why he had entered so hastily during a private meeting. The soldiers stammered that they had found him. Everyone present widened their eyes in shock, and a blue-haired dragon grabbed the soldier, shaking him urgently. Tiamat demanded to know where her mate was, threatening him if he did not answer immediately. The soldier revealed that Issei was in northern Canada, in Alaska, last seen buying food before heading into the woods where he had a cabin. Without hesitation, Tiamat pushed the soldier aside and dashed out the door, eager to find her mate and claim him as her own. Meanwhile, Issei was preparing a bottle of milk while cradling a 7-month-old baby in his arms. He remarked to the baby, Suko, that he seemed hungry and wished his mother could be with them. He glanced at a photo of himself with a beautiful woman, a smile on his face as he embraced her Piardinanti belly, a wedding ring glinting beside them. After feeding the baby and gently patting his back until he burped, Issei laid him down in his crib and quietly stepped away. Just then he heard a knock at the door. Grabbing an axe, he approached cautiously and opened the door, only to scowl at the sight before him. He recognized Tiamat, who flirtatiously remarked on how he treated his future wife, suggesting he needed a punishment. Issei coldly requested that she leave his home. Suddenly, several magical circles appeared, and from them emerged the last people he wanted to see. Rias exclaimed his name, and Issei internally groaned at their unexpected arrival. From the day Issei discovered his ex-girlfriends with others, he felt a deep pain inside. When he learned he was suffering from dragonfall, he tried to seek help from Draig, but the dragon only wished for him to perish, lamenting the tarnishing of his title as the celestial dragon. When Issei ventured into the dimensional rift with the little power he had left to ask Ophis for assistance, he found her with Red, and not just her. Yasaka, Seraphal, Penemu, Valerie, and Ingvild were all there, oblivious to his presence. For 2 weeks, he endured the symptoms of dragonfall while they continued their lives as if he didn't exist. It became clear to him that none of them truly cared for him, not the leaders, not his parents, who had known what the girls were doing but chose to remain silent, nor his so-called friends who were aware of everything but never spoke up. Days turned into weeks, then months, and Issei knew he would soon leave this world. Yet, something within him held him back. In a flashback, a dark place emerged, where Issei sat on the ground, crying bitterly, observed by a dragon that did nothing to comfort him, waiting for him to die so it could find a better host. Draig expressed his frustration, wishing for Issei to perish so he could be free. Issei questioned Draig about their shared experiences and battles, lamenting that Draig only cared for his worthless title. Draig insulted him, blaming Issei for his reputation as the issei dragon and hoping he would suffer in death. Suddenly, dark chains ensnared the dragon, pulling him into the shadows. A voice emerged, expressing annoyance at Draig's complaints. Issei, confused, asked who it was. The voice claimed to be his negative feelings, which had grown strong enough to manifest. The shadow, with eerie eyes and a mouth, did not frighten Issei. It explained that it had eliminated the fear that any human possesses. Issei, feeling lost and devoid of hope, acknowledged that he was no longer human but a creation of those who had wronged him. The shadow offered to help him regain his humanity if he allowed it. Issei doubted the value of such help, believing he was destined to die. The shadow embraced him, imparting words of encouragement to always move forward, no matter how difficult the path. A bright light enveloped them as they fused into one being. Issei realized what he had to do. From that moment, Issei Hayadu transformed. Whenever he saw the girls happy with others, he felt nothing. One day, he called them all together to discuss his wedding plans. They appeared before him, some calm, others bored, as he pulled out a small scroll and requested their signatures. Unbeknownst to them, the paper was to cancel the wedding and end his engagement. He expressed his gratitude to the Gremory, Citri, Phoenix, Agars, Baal, and the others, feeling a weight lifted from his shoulders. He bid them farewell, wishing them happiness in a rather colorful manner, leaving them stunned by his words as he exited the house. Issei then approached a large door, kicking it open and startling those inside. They sighed in annoyance upon recognizing him, except for one, a green-haired individual who observed him closely. Issei promised to be quick, stating he would return a chess case and other items that no longer served him, including a letter meant to be opened only when everyone was gathered. He turned and slammed the door behind him, leaving a heavy silence in the room. Ajuka examined the chess case, finding all the pieces intact, while Falbium and Surzek noted the titles of property, all now in Rias's name, with Issei's name crossed out. In a forest, Issei entered a cave, reaching a chest containing an object he had hidden away. He revealed a beautiful inverted celestial halberd, drawing the attention of Draig, who demanded to know what it was. Issei invoked Ascalon, plunging it into the ground and extracting 2 spheres, one red and one purple, silencing the dragon. Draig remarked that Issei's aura now resembled that of a reincarnated demon. Issei assured him that the best part was yet to come. He placed his hand over his chest and shouted, causing the pawn pieces of the Gremory to shoot forth. He felt a sense of humanity returning, but he still needed to rid himself of one last burden. Draig questioned his intentions as Issei pulled with all his might at a green sphere attached to him. Issei explained he was removing a weight from his existence, striving to be free of all supernatural ties. Ultimately, he succeeded, holding the green sphere in his hand before casting it far into the darkness of the night, releasing a long-held sigh. Issei resolved to leave the country and start anew, seeking a better life away from the past. He thought about where he could go and decided to head to Canada. For a while, he worked as a lumberjack, earning some money, and during that time, he met a woman with a demonic appearance. Fortunately, she did not recognize him, and he had changed his name to Toji. For a while, she watched him from a distance, like a guardian. As time passed, they progressed in their relationship. They started as friends, and after 11 months, they became a couple. She revealed to him that she was a demon and a descendant of the original demon, Belphegor. However, he was burdened with a strange illness that made him weaker each day, with no cure in sight. He shared his true identity with her, explaining that he had left everything behind after discovering that the women in his life had betrayed him, and no one had warned him. She comforted him, assuring him that he should not dwell on the past. She would always be by his side through thick and thin because she loved him for who he was. She offered him a gentle kiss and embraced him, resting his head against her comforting presence. As time went on, they married, and she was expecting their child. It was the happiest moment of his life, unaware that it would be the last time he would have her by his side. Issei paced back and forth, feeling anxious as his wife was in labor. Concern for her health weighed heavily on him. After a few minutes, he heard a faint cry and rushed inside, worry etched on his face. Despite the attempts of doctors and nurses to stop him, his determination and strength made it impossible for them to hold him back. He asked Astrid how she was doing, expressing his concern for her well-being. Astrid reassured him, saying she was fine and wanted to introduce him to someone. She revealed a small, sleeping baby, gently saying that the little one was his father. Issei took the baby in his arms, overwhelmed by a wave of emotion he never expected to feel. Tears streamed down his face, not from sadness but from pure happiness. He smiled at Astrid and kissed her, grateful for the joy she had brought into his life. He spoke softly to the baby, introducing himself as the father and promising to always protect him and his beautiful mother. However, he noticed Astrid had closed her eyes, a serene smile on her face. Panic surged within him as he called her name, but there was no response. In that moment, he realized that she had passed away after enduring the labor, using her last strength to bring their precious child into the world. On the day of her funeral, Issei cried like never before. His friends offered their condolences, urging him to be strong, not just for himself but for their son, reminding him of his promise to protect the child. He held the baby close, whispering that he would always be there for him, and that his mother would forever remain in their hearts. Time passed, and now all the leaders of each faction, along with friends and former girlfriends, stood before Issei's cabin. Among them was the one woman who had never betrayed him, but he chose to remain silent. Issei firmly stated that they needed to leave his home immediately, asserting his authority with a weapon resting on his shoulder. Tiamat insisted that he return to her and have many children with her. Issei responded with frustration, telling her that he had no time for her games and demanded that everyone respect his wishes and leave his property. Anastasia Lucifer, bearer of the Alaster, sword from her late uncle Sparta, stood alongside Tiamat, the dragon queen of Karma, and Trixie, the dragon goddess of the apocalypse, known for her unpredictable nature. Astrid, the wife of Belphegor, had plans of her own, as she intended to revive Issei with the Holy Grail. In a flashback, all the faction leaders gathered together. The doors swung open, revealing the girls accompanied by their partners. The leader of the group, Rias, asked what was happening and why everyone was summoned. Surzek remained silent, handing her a letter with a guilty expression before returning to his place. Rias glanced at the letter addressed to them, signed by Issei, and felt an unsettling knot in her chest. The letter revealed the truth, accusing them of hypocrisy and ungratefulness for taking credit for others' achievements. It also exposed their betrayals, stating that Issei had realized they never truly loved him. He declared that he would no longer be the pillar of the alliance and rejected the Hyudu name, stepping away from his role as the Security. Upon reading the letter, the girls collapsed to the floor, crying bitterly. An albino girl noticed another letter inside the envelope. As she took it, her tears flowed even more, drawing the attention of the others. What they saw shattered them further: a divorce and cancellation notice, complete with their signatures and essays. After this revelation, they searched for him for weeks until one day, they found Draig's sphere embedded in a mountain. It revealed how Issei relinquished all his power, severing ties with Great Red and Ophis, and how he removed his pieces with a spell, ultimately casting away his sacred gear. Months later, during a wedding celebration involving the Gremmery, Citri, Phoenix, and Baal factions, a woman radiating the essence of Lucifer interrupted the ceremony. She introduced herself as Lady Anastasia Lucifer, granddaughter of Rizavim Levon Lucifer and bearer of the demon-slaying sword Alaster. She declared war on the factions and summoned her loyal warriors to her side. The girls' partners stood beside their queen, revealing that they had been deceived all along and were survivors of the Chaos Brigade. They admitted that they had rid themselves of a nuisance Issei. The truth crushed the girls, bringing back memories of the brown-haired boy who had fought for them and sacrificed himself, only to be abandoned while they gave their purity to others. Anastasia expressed her desire to stay but stated she had a war to prepare for. She vowed that when it was over and the girls were gone, she would seek out the former Security, make him her husband, and dedicate herself to his happiness, promising to give him her purity and be the mother of his children. As time passed, each faction suffered attacks from the new terrorist group, Rebellion, aimed at exterminating all faction leaders. They lost many resources, with Grigory being the hardest hit, losing all their experiments and Azazel's research. In the underworld, chaos ensued. In the heavens, a revolt demanded the removal of Archangel Michael as leader, proposing that the title be given to his older brother Male. Gabriel, Irina, and Griselda fell from grace for betraying their partners. In Asgard, Odin was dethroned by his son Loki, who, thanks to Issei, abandoned the absurd idea of initiating Ragnarok and began a quest to find him and offer him refuge as a warrior. In the realm of the yokai, Yasaka and her daughter were expelled from the palace by their sister Aunt Ari, who became the new queen and sought the brown-haired boy to offer him shelter in Tokyo. In Romania, when Valerie Teeps learned of the faction's actions, she severed ties with them and formed alliances with the yokai, Asgardians, Greeks, and Egyptians, who admired the bravery of the brown-haired boy. As the years went by, the factions endured sporadic attacks from rebellion, resulting in 40% of the city of Lilith reduced to rubble and its inhabitants taken hostage. Grigory was nearly destroyed. The heavens had only 25% of their forces left, while the other factions remained stable for the time being. As for the children of the girls, some chose to raise them, while others abandoned them at orphanages. Some were forced into servitude, including the children of Rias, Aquino, Seraphal, Penemu, Gabriel, Sona, Invik, Kuroka, Ravel, and others not mentioned. The rest opted for abortions, caring little for their future, focused solely on having children with their men. 10 years passed since the brown-haired boy's disappearance, filled with suffering and pain. The girls took out their frustrations on their children, abusing them or neglecting them. After a long search, they finally found him, but he had changed. He was taller, his hair now black, and although he bore a human aura, immense power lay within him. The first words they heard from him were cold and filled with disdain, as he told them to leave his home, stating that their presence only brought him discomfort. Their hearts sank as they lowered their heads in shame and regret, realizing that the once kind-hearted, perverted boy had transformed into a man with a chilling demeanor and a deadly gaze. Issei Hairu, a student at Core Academy and a member of a notorious group, had a normal life until he was betrayed by his first girlfriend, who turned out to be a fallen angel. He was reincarnated as a demon by Rias Gremmery, the heir of the Gremmery clan, marking the beginning of his extraordinary journey. He fought against an immortal and a madman who sought to ignite a new holy war. Later, he battled Loki, the god of lies, where he narrowly escaped death in the jaws of Fenrir and managed to seal it away with Thor's hammer. He then saved his friend Asia from the deranged demon Diodora Astaroth, witnessing her apparent demise and unleashing the Juggernaut drive in its incomplete form, only to be stopped by his rival, Vale. After these events, he traveled to Tokyo, where he rescued Queen Yasaka from the hero faction and met Ophis and the dragon god, Great Red. The rest of his story unfolded similarly to the manga, but in this version, Issei had yet to form a close-knit group. Time passed, and Issei discovered the infidelity of the girls around him, realizing that everyone knew but chose to remain silent. This betrayal nearly cost him his life during a dragon fall, but a mysterious being saved him from that cruel fate. Determined to start anew, he sought a life away from the supernatural. However, peace was fleeting, as he knew his past would come back to disrupt his tranquility and threaten his most precious treasure. Anyone who dared to harm it would face his wrath. Issei, now a single father, possessed unknown superhuman strength and the haki of the king, allowing him to harden his body, making him nearly invincible. He wielded the inverted celestial halberd and the sacred spear chastiful. His son, Tsuko Fushiguro Belphegor, was the pride of his life, while his wife, Astrid Belphegor, had passed away. Issei was not in a good mood as he faced a dragon woman who had sworn never to lie to him but had ultimately broken her promise by hiding the truth about Red and Ophis. The only one who had shared the truth was Tanin, who had been threatened by the two dragon gods. Their friendship mattered more to him than silence, but the last he heard, Tanin had been killed by Red, and Issei vowed to avenge his friend. Tiamat tried to persuade him to come with her, promising happiness, but Issei firmly rejected her, demanding she leave him alone or face the consequences. Valley, his rival, insisted that they needed him back. Issei sarcastically remarked that he was no longer Vala's rival and that he was not the strongest. Surzek explained that Issei's sister had sealed away 80% of his power, preventing him from accessing his balance break. They had come to seek his help and forgiveness. Issei dismissed their pleas, stating that they would only take credit for his actions again. As he slowly closed the door, a red-haired girl with tear-stained eyes stopped him. Rias pleaded for him to return, expressing how much they needed him, but Issei coldly told her to leave and find another fool. Akino also expressed her longing for him, and the others echoed their feelings. With a sigh, Issei swiftly struck Rias in the face, sending her crashing into a tree before shutting the door behind him. Outside, he cracked his neck, realizing that words alone would not suffice. Suddenly, a drunken Thor appeared before him, brandishing his hammer and boasting of superiority. Issei warned him not to speak to him in such a manner, declaring that he was unworthy of wielding Mjolnir. Thor unleashed a storm of lightning, striking the cabin, but upon hearing his son cry, Issei's killer instinct surged. With a powerful blow, he sent the god of thunder crashing down, causing Thor to lose his hammer. Seeing Mjolnir on the ground, Issei picked it up effortlessly, surprising everyone around him, including an albino who wished to fight but knew he was outmatched, and a dragoness who watched him intently. Thor demanded the return of his hammer, but his call went unanswered as it no longer responded to him. After receiving a shock and a heavy blow from a metallic object, Issei realized that Mjolnir had chosen him as its new wielder. A Nordic tattoo appeared on his right forearm, and he rushed back inside to comfort his son. He reassured Tsuko, who was crying and trembling in fear, having nearly lost his father due to an idiot's actions. Outside, the leaders of each faction, including his former wives, the two dragon gods and his former friends, assisted an unconscious Rias and a dazed Thor, who bore the marks of the electric attack. They watched as Issei emerged once more, this time holding his baby son, and the aura surrounding the child left them in shock. Tiamat questioned if the child was truly his, to which Issei proudly introduced Tsuko as his greatest pride. The sound of shattering crystals echoed, symbolizing the heartbreak of the girls who realized that someone else had taken his purity and given him a child that was not theirs. Asia inquired about his wife, but the atmosphere was thick with tension and unspoken emotions. Issei spoke with sadness and jealousy. He lowered his gaze, and everyone understood the weight of his words. Some felt a sense of relief, believing they had a chance to mend their hearts and care for his child as a good wife and mother should. Tiamat offered to be the new mother for his little one, but Issei firmly rejected her, stating that none of them were worthy to be the mother of his child. He knew well that some had abandoned, harmed, or mistreated their own children, blaming innocent souls for their actions. No one dared to speak up, for issei's words rang true. However, Saji, ever the fool, arrogantly suggested they simply eliminate the threat and erase issei's memories. Suddenly, a chilling atmosphere enveloped them, and a palpable sense of danger filled the air, emanating from an irate issei. In a swift motion, he appeared before Saji, who was too startled to react. Saji was sent flying across the forest, crashing into a mountain, his eyes wide with shock, while issei stood with a darkened fist extended. Issei warned that if anyone uttered another foolish remark, he would not hesitate to take action. Maria appeared out of nowhere, embracing him from behind, tears streaming down her face as she begged for forgiveness. Issei told her she had 5 seconds to let go, but Maria refused, insisting she would not release him until he forgave her. In a swift move, issei freed himself from her grasp, appearing behind her and gently knocking her unconscious. He laid her down carefully and turned to the others, asking who wanted to be next. No one moved, still processing what had just happened. Issei then declared he would count to 3 before they needed to leave. 1, 2. Everyone hurried away, vowing to return another time. Issei sighed in exhaustion and decided to go back inside his house. Before entering, he extended his arm, and Mjolnir appeared in his hand, disappearing in a flash of lightning. He placed his child on the floor and lay down on his bed, feeling irritated that his peace had been disrupted. He watched as his child crawled toward him, climbing up his leg to rest on his abdomen. Challenging times loomed ahead for the father-son duo, as the tranquility that had lasted so long was coming to an end, and issei knew he would soon be overwhelmed. Months passed since the events at issei's property, and he had been subtly pursued from a distance by the girls. He was aware of their attention but chose to ignore it, focusing on more important matters. He was busy preparing for his son's upcoming first birthday, knowing his aunts would shower him with kisses and gifts, which brought him joy. However, he felt a tinge of sadness, realizing he needed a woman's guidance to help raise his child. Issei spoke to his son, expressing excitement about the upcoming birthday and mentioning the gifts he had already prepared: a teddy bear and a ball. Watched as his son crawled toward the items, throwing the teddy bear aside to play with the ball, hitting it with glee. Issei quickly grabbed a camera to capture the moment, imagining how he would embarrass his son in the future by showing these photos to any girl he brought home. Unbeknownst to him, he was being watched from a distance by a woman with horns and silver hair, accompanied by another woman with dragon wings. Anastasia pointed out Issei playing with his son and expressed her desire to be by his side, to give him the love of a mother. Trixie reminded her that they had made a pact to share Issei, and that they would both be mothers to his child. The dragon goddess of the apocalypse had been freed thanks to the Alaster sword, which had broken her seal. Initially intent on destroying all supernatural beings for harming her mate, she was convinced by Lucifer to take a different approach, one that involved claiming Issei for herself and ensuring he would not abandon them like others had. However, they faced another obstacle, the Dragon Queen of Karma, who was also in love with Issei. Trixie wondered how they would present their gifts to their future child, and Anastasia revealed her plan, producing 2 medallions that could conceal their auras and allow them to appear human. Trixie eagerly took a medallion, feeling her power diminish as she donned it. Meanwhile, in the Dragon Kingdom, a woman was grooming her hair beside a large gift. Tiamat resolved that if she wanted to win Issei's affection, she first needed to earn the love of his child. She believed that once her child called her Mama, Issei would have no choice but to let her be by his side to raise their little one, and with the help of a book on being a good mother and wife, she was determined to succeed. In the sky, a woman with chestnut hair was fixing her hair when a man entered her room, accompanied by another man. Maria greeted them warmly, acknowledging Mael and her son. Mael mentioned that he had come to deliver the package she requested, while Jesus expressed his concern for his mother's well-being. Maria thanked Mael for bringing what she needed and reassured Jesus that she was fine. Mael, however, questioned her decision, expressing concern about what might happen if things went wrong. Maria comforted him, insisting that nothing would go wrong as she planned to attend the birthday celebration of her future son, who would also be Jesus's future brother and his future father. Jesus felt a chill at the thought of this man becoming his new father, struggling with the implications of such a change. But if you hurt him, I will take action. Maria expressed that it wasn't so bad. The person in question just had a wounded heart. She knew it would take time to earn his forgiveness, but when that moment came, she would be there with open arms to give him the love he deserved. She acknowledged that there were other women who would also seek his forgiveness and a chance to start anew. Tiamat, Anastasia, Trixie, and Maria all agreed that they would help mend Issei's heart. Issei was relaxing in a hot spring with his child resting on his chest when suddenly, he felt a chill run through his body, sensing eyes watching him from different directions. He wondered why he felt as if the earth wanted to swallow him. 3 days later, Issei was seen running from place to place, preparing everything for his son's birthday party as the guests were about to arrive. He checked off items on his list: sweets, food, drinks, decorations, piñata, and the birthday cake was on its way. Just then, someone knocked on the door. He approached and opened it to find a muscular man with a white beard holding a cake. Claus announced his arrival, asking where the birthday boy was so he could give him his gift. Issei thanked Claus for coming, pointing out where his son was. Claus chuckled, saying he wouldn't miss his friend's son's birthday for anything, especially since he had followed Issei's advice and was back in shape after saving Christmas 5 years ago. Issei downplayed his contribution, expressing gratitude for Claus attending such an important event. Claus laughed, saying he wouldn't miss it for the world, especially for his adopted grandson, and revealed he had a gift. Entering the cabin, Claus approached the little boy, who was wearing a bear-themed pajama and looked up at him with innocent eyes. Claus could feel a great purity in the child's heart and decided to give him a little friend who would grow alongside him. He pulled out a red bag and from it, a moving box, placing it on the floor. The boy crawled over, lifting the lid to discover a small creature that liked his face, bringing him joy. Claus introduced the creature as Poro, who would be both a friend and a guardian. The little boy happily took Poro into his arms. They spent some time chatting about trivial matters until Claus had to leave, as he had much work to do with Christmas only 6 months away. Issei reminded him that he was still on the naughty list. Claus laughed, saying Issei was on an even worse list, while his son would be on the nice list and receive gifts, leaving Issei with only a bag of coal. Claus added one more thing: to be careful with his daughter, who was a bit wild. Issei promised to keep that in mind. After saying goodbye, some time passed before there was another knock at the door. Upon opening it, Issei welcomed his guests inside. He noticed his son, Suko, looking a bit nervous as he was being hugged by one of his aunts and looked at affectionately by his cousins. Meanwhile, Issei was having a calm conversation with his friends. However, when he opened the door again, his smile faded, replaced by anger as he faced 2 women he did not want to see today, especially on such an important occasion. Issei confronted Tiamat and Maria, asking what they were doing there. Tiamat mentioned that she had arrived just as the single woman was about to knock on his door. Maria defended herself, saying she only wanted to give a gift to little Suko and that it wasn't about seeking his forgiveness, she simply wanted to give something to the child. Tiamat chimed in, saying she also had a gift, presenting a large box. Issei sighed but allowed them to enter, warning them that if they caused any trouble, he would have to ask them to leave. They promised to behave and were allowed inside. Maria complimented Issei's cozy home, while Tiamat asked where the child was to give him his gifts. Issei informed them that Suko was in the living room being smothered by his aunts, admitting he felt a bit envious of his son's good fortune. Tiamat and Maria thought to themselves that if only Issei knew they wanted to do that with him every day. The party continued until there was another knock at the door. Issei went to see who it was and found 2 unfamiliar girls standing there. He asked if they were lost. Anastasia replied that they had followed a group of people and wanted to know what was being celebrated. They were celebrating the birthday of Issei's son, and he invited everyone to come in for some hot chocolate since it was quite chilly outside. Trixie expressed her gratitude for Issei's kindness, complimenting him as a great father for doing this for his little one. Issei humbly acknowledged the praise, mentioning that he learned his manners from his grandfather, who always said that good manners shape a person. As the 2 women entered the house, they noticed many people inside, but they also sensed the presence of a dragon and an angel, identifying the sources of that powerful aura. Trixie and Anastasia thought to themselves that they had more competition, but that wouldn't deter them from their goal of becoming the Fushigara ladies. Issei arrived with a cup of hot chocolate and some cookies for each of them, encouraging them to enjoy it while it was still warm, as it tasted even better that way. The two women took a sip and their faces lit up with joy, unable to resist asking where such a delicious treat came from. Issei explained that it was from a friend who lived in the North Pole and offered to give them a bag since he had plenty. They nodded in agreement as Issei went down to the basement and returned with a bag of chocolate and a recipe book. Inside the house, there was joy and fun, with little Suko delighted by all the gifts he received from his aunts and the two women. Meanwhile, the other two felt a bit defeated for not bringing anything for him, but they still had plenty of birthdays ahead. Elsewhere, Santa Claus urged his daughter to calm down and not do anything reckless. Elsa insisted that she would act out of love, as the man she loved was alone and that child needed a mother, and she intended to be that mother. Claus expressed his concerns, stating that he couldn't allow her to unleash a beast that would cause an eternal ice age. But Elsa was determined, promising that once everything was settled and she had her husband and child by her side, everything would return to normal. Meanwhile, beneath the North Pole lay a massive beast, completely chained, one of its eyes opening to reveal the symbol of frost. Days passed since the birthday celebration, and life for the father-son duo changed as they were frequently visited by Maria and Tiamat, who claimed that the child needed a mother's love and care. Issei had no choice but to give in, seeing how happy his son was with their presence, allowing only them to enter the cabin. Additionally, the temperature began to drop even further, affecting much of the world. In Latin America, the locals were finally at ease, as it seemed that God had heard their prayers to cool down the relentless heat that had caused them so much discomfort. Now, they enjoyed a refreshing change from the previous unbearable heat. The Latinos, thank you God. Back in Alaska, Issei appeared somewhat worried as his little one had fallen ill with a cold. If it weren't for Tiamat, his child would have been frozen solid. She offered warmth by cradling the small one against her abdomen, and without hesitation, the child sought comfort, resting against her. Tiamat felt a small sigh escape her lips. Tiamat expressed her concern, telling the little one not to do that, as she didn't have any milk. Maria chimed in, mentioning that while Tiamat might not have milk, she did, thanks to her own children who had grown strong and healthy. Taking little Suko from Tiamat's arms, who pouted at having her future child taken away, Maria shook her head at Tiamat's childishness. She revealed one of her births to feed Suko, who wore a joyful expression as he was nourished. Issei, feeling a bit envious of the lucky little one, decided to head into the forest to chop some wood for the fireplace. He took his axe and stepped outside the cabin, unaware that he was being watched by a group of blue-skinned men who followed him at a distance. Once in the forest, Issei began working, cutting down trees without realizing he was surrounded by the blue figures. After chopping down 3 trees, he loaded the logs onto his shoulder and decided to head home. Suddenly, he heard a branch snap and dropped the logs to the ground. He called out, demanding to know who was there. Several blue beings emerged, shimmering with frost and armed. Issei questioned their identity and who had sent them. The leader, a frostwalker, informed him that their queen had sent them for him and urged him to cooperate or face the consequences. Issei chose the latter, invoking his gloves that crackled with electricity. Thus began a fierce battle, where one by one, the frostwalkers fell before Issei's superhuman strength. However, he too was not unscathed as some arrows struck his back, causing him to grunt in pain. In a fit of anger, he unleashed a powerful shockwave by striking the ground, defeating the remaining frostwalkers while a few managed to escape to report back to their queen. Exhausted and in pain, Issei collapsed to the ground, struggling to breathe. Miraculously, all his wounds healed rapidly, and the pain subsided. He stood up again, lifted the logs onto his shoulder, and left the area. He reflected on how tough those foes were and how his axe had been ineffective against their skin, pondering who had sent them and the mention of a queen. Meanwhile, in the north, at the ice castle, Elsa learned that her beloved had managed to defeat the frostwalkers. She stood serious, with a massive sleeping beast behind her. The Frostwalker reported that not only had Issei defeated their group, but he was no longer a supernatural being, but a mere mortal once again. Elsa expressed disbelief that a simple mortal had vanquished 50 of them. Before the Frostwalker could finish his report, he was silenced by a shard of ice. Elsa scolded her soldiers for their incompetence, declaring that next time she would send her generals. She inquired about the progress of her plan to freeze the world, receiving the update that it was still at 45%, but soon the entire world would be an ice block. Elsa declared that soon Issei would be hers alone. In another part of the castle, a woman with ash-blonde hair was seen brushing her long locks while gazing into a large mirror. She placed her brush on the table and retrieved a black jacket from a drawer, hugging it as if it were the most precious thing in the world, inhaling its scent. Elsa sighed dreamily, recalling how it still smelled like her beloved Issei. She twirled with the garment in hand, lying back on her bed, continuing to breathe in the scent that belonged to him. Memories flooded back of the day he saved her from danger, how he also rescued her father from her uncle, and how she fell hopelessly in love with him while he protected her. She walked to the balcony, gazing at the horizon, reminiscing about that moment. In a flashback 5 years earlier, Elsa was seen in a cell, shackled with special restraints that suppressed her magic. Her father, bruised and bloodied, sat across from her. She asked if anyone would come to their rescue, to which her father reassured her that he had sent Rodolfo to find allies. Elsa expressed her desire to return home safely, fearing the monsters holding them captive. From the shadows emerged a dark figure with a malicious smile. Elsa firmly rejected Pitch Black's advances, stating she would only marry the man who won her heart. Pitch, unfazed, threatened that when her hope faded he would be there to claim her. Her father warned Pitch to stay away from his daughter, but Pitch taunted him, knowing he couldn't use his magic in his current state. As Pitch prepared to leave, he was interrupted by another figure, and in a moment of defiance, Elsa kicked him away. Her father praised her strength, while Pitch's companion mocked him, threatening to execute him the next day. Back in the present, Elsa continued to cherish the memories of Issei, longing for the day they would be reunited. The subjects were gathered around a map of the Kingdom of Christmas. Grandpa Noel addressed them, outlining the plan. He instructed Rudolph to lead his men to the northern entrance, while Issei would take the southern side, assuring him that he was fine to go alone. Issei confidently stated that with his skills, he could make his way through, and if things got tough, he had his sword with him. Grandpa Noel then directed Russo to head west and position his troops and tanks effectively, promising to remove him from his blacklist if everything went well. Russo acknowledged the order, confirming that his men would be ready by the next day, just before the execution of Claus. Grandpa Noel planned to attack from above to prevent his son Krampus from making a foolish decision. He advised everyone to rest, as they would have a busy day ahead. The morning of the execution arrived, and the inhabitants of Santa Claus's kingdom wore expressions of sorrow, knowing they would witness the death of their lord. Among them, Mrs. Saley, Santa's wife, was in tears, heartbroken over her husband's impending fate, unable to stop it as they were surrounded by mischievous elves and servants of Krampus and Pitch Black. In a cell, Elsa watched the events unfold, tears streaming down her beautiful face as she pleaded silently for her father's safety. Krampus addressed the crowd, announcing that they would witness the death of their lord at his hands, laughing maniacally. Claus, despite his predicament, comforted his friends and beloved wife, assuring them that he would always be with them in their hearts. He was held by one of the elves, and the executioner was revealed to be his own brother, Krampus. Claus smiled, reflecting on his good life, even as the axe began its slow descent, memories flashing before his eyes, his transformation into Santa Claus, the birth of his daughter, and many cherished moments. Elsa cried out for her father, while Saley called for her beloved. Just as the axe was about to strike, Krampus was suddenly knocked away by a powerful punch, crashing into a tree. Grandpa Noel had arrived just in time to save Claus. Claus was surprised to see his father and asked if Rudolph was responsible for his arrival. Grandpa Noel confirmed it and pointed out a tall man with a large shield, revealing it was Uncle Braum. Claus was amazed at how quickly he had come, but Braum insisted they needed to fight first. Krampus was furious at his father for interrupting the execution, but Grandpa Noel declared he would not allow Krampus to harm his younger brother. Krampus expressed his resentment, feeling overshadowed by Claus, but Grandpa Noel reminded him that he loved both of his sons equally. He warned Krampus not to involve their deceased mother in this conflict, but Krampus dismissed his father's words, ordering his minions to attack. As the evil elves, toys, monsters, and gingerbread cookies charged, explosions erupted around them. Russo rallied his soldiers, showcasing their military might as they fought back against the elves. Meanwhile, Rudolph and his brothers were engaged in combat, using their fists, candy canes, and firearms against the monsters. In the cell, Elsa watched everything unfold, feeling joy at the sight of her grandfather and great-uncle. Suddenly, Pitch burst into the cell, grabbing Elsa by the hair and attempting to drag her away. Elsa struggled, cursing at him. Pitch declared that they would escape together, whether she liked it or not. Just as they were about to leave, a shadow passed by, causing Pitch to cover Elsa's mouth to silence her. He hid behind the wall as the shadow approached the door, but after a few tense moments, it moved on, allowing Pitch to breathe a sigh of relief. However, that relief was short-lived as a hand broke through the concrete wall, grabbing Pitch by the neck and causing him to release Elsa in fear. Issei appeared, taunting Pitch, who threatened him with dire consequences. Issei dismissed Pitch's threats, stating that he would suffer the consequences instead. He dragged Pitch into a dark place, where Pitch pleaded for mercy, but Issei assured him that this was just the beginning. The sounds of bones cracking and Pitch's cries for help echoed in the darkness. Eventually, the door opened, revealing Pitch's terrified face, but he was pulled back inside for more punishment. Elsa could only cover her ears to block out Pitch's pleas. After a while, she heard footsteps approaching her cell and, frightened, picked up a stick to defend herself. When Issei entered, he saw Elsa holding the stick. He reassured her that he was there to rescue her. Noticing the torn state of her clothing, he took off his jacket and offered it to her, averting his gaze. Elsa, blushing, thanked him for the jacket and was then lifted by Issei, her cheeks reddening even more as she stammered in surprise at his actions. Issei explained that he was carrying her because, in her current state, she could only crawl out. He brought her outside, where they saw everyone gathered, with Krampus trapped inside a crystal sphere. The crowd turned to smile at Elsa, and a man approached to hand her over to Issei. Elsa was relieved to see her father and expressed her fears of losing him forever. Claus credited Rudolph and his friends for the rescue and noted that Issei was not the one they were searching for. Issei requested that they keep his presence a secret, not wanting to be found. Issei had saved a girl's life, and her father expressed his gratitude, asking where the troublesome Pitch was. Issei reassured him, mentioning that he had given Pitch a good scare, which made everyone present uneasy. Russo commented that Issei was scarier than his own mother, prompting laughter from the others. Afterward, a celebration ensued where Issei was challenged to a dance-off against Russo, who ultimately won. However, there was someone who looked at Issei differently. She gazed at him with affection and, determined, approached him to ask a question. Elsa hesitantly inquired if Issei had a girlfriend. When he replied no, it made her happy, but his next words dampened her spirits. He revealed that he was married, showing off his wedding ring, and asked why she wanted to know. Elsa, feeling disheartened, said it was just curiosity before walking away, leaving Issei confused. The party continued until dawn, resulting in a chaotic scene. Braum and Russo were found sleeping together. Issei was perched in a tree, Claus and his father lay on the ground surrounded by empty mead barrels, and Rodolfo was on a rooftop with several women. Elsa observed the aftermath and used her ice magic to gently lower Issei from the tree while he remained asleep. She kissed his cheek, vowing that no matter how long it took, she would be by his side forever because she loved him. Back in the present, Elsa reflected on her feelings. Now that the woman who had been a rival was gone, Issei would be hers. Meanwhile, Issei returned home to find the girls had defeated the same creatures that had attacked him, and he was concerned about his son. He asked the girls if they were okay and how Tsuko was doing. Maria assured him that Tsuko was fine, indicating the boy was surrounded by a protective barrier. Tiamat explained that they had been on their way to the nearest city when they were suddenly attacked, but Maria had managed to shield Tsuko. Issei shared that he had faced a similar situation, where the attackers claimed they were sent by their queen to take him, but he had refused and dealt with them. Tiamat found it strange that they had been told to hand over the baby, yet all the attackers were now defeated. She declared she wouldn't allow weaklings to take her son. Issei found this suspicious but prioritized his son's safety over everything else. Maria whispered to Tiamat that she had almost messed up, to which Tiamat retorted, questioning who she was calling foolish. Maria confidently stated that she would soon no longer be a virgin when Issei claimed her. Tiamat insisted that she would be the one to win Issei first. Maria proudly declared that Issei preferred her because she could nurse, while Tiamat could not, leaving the dragons stunned by the truth. Tiamat vowed to defeat Maria one day. Days passed since the attempted kidnapping by the Ice Walkers and the queen who wanted both Issei and his son. Issei was not pleased as the factions continued to bother him about the incident, and he was growing weary of their presence, especially the girls who had tried to touch his son. He was seated in his cabin, sipping tea, when Loki, the god of mischief, arrived, also enjoying a cup. Issei had initially thought Loki would attack, but he only wanted to talk and offered Issei some tea from Asgard. Loki asked how things had been lately, his tone serious. Issei replied that he had been dealing with headaches due to the factions and Loki's brother constantly pestering him to return as a pillar, along with demands to return Mjolnir or face consequences. Issei had ended up sending Loki's brother to the hospital with broken bones after that ultimatum. Loki acknowledged that he had received reports of his brother's injuries and noted that his wife was not pleased with Issei's actions, even requesting that Issei face trial for what he had done. Loki expressed his indifference toward the life of a once heroic figure, now reduced to a drunken and prideful warrior. He recalled a time when this individual had attempted to use a child as a shield, but fortunately, he had been stopped and demoted from his position as the god of thunder to that of a mere warrior. Loki continued, explaining that they were not the only ones facing these mysterious threats, which had emerged from unknown origins. Thanks to the Olympians, they had managed to capture one of these beings and had tried every means possible to extract information, but to no avail. However, after several days, they had developed a weapon capable of defeating these creatures, though there was a small complication. Issei, curious and concerned, asked about this complication and why he felt it involved him. Loki explained that the weapon had been crafted from the finest materials of both Asgard and Olympus, requiring the fusion of two opposing energies, a process that had nearly cost them their lives. Issei inquired about the nature of the weapon, and Loki revealed that it consisted of dual swords forged from the energy of a star and imbued with the primordial fire from the sun's core. Issei was astonished and questioned how they had managed to enter the sun's core, a place capable of destroying even the strongest of gods. Loki fell silent, his voice heavy with sorrow as he revealed that the god Baldur had sacrificed his own life to obtain that flame. Issei's eyes widened in surprise, and he stood up, stepping outside to express his frustration over the loss of another friend. Loki understood his pain, recalling Baldur's last words, asking them to protect his friend from falling into darkness and to watch over his mother and nephew. After about 15 minutes, Issei had calmed down, though the forest around him resembled a battlefield, with fallen trees and large craters. Loki asked if he felt better, and Issei requested to be taken to Olympus to see the swords. Loki nodded and, placing a hand on his shoulder, called upon Heimdall to transport them to Olympus. Meanwhile, in another part of the sky, Maria watched happily as her future child played in a park. She remembered how her future husband had asked her to care for their child until everything settled down. There had been a moment of defeat when Issei had refused to leave their child in a cave with Tiamat, fearing that a dragon might eat him, which would lead to a catastrophic outcome for all dragons, including the dragon gods. As little Tsuko crawled around the park, he noticed a man playing a small harp and approached him out of curiosity. Male was calmly playing his harp when he felt a small tug on his tunic. Looking down, he saw a child gazing up at him with curiosity. Male asked the child who he was and how he had arrived in the sky, surprised by the child's aura, which mirrored that of the man who had defeated him in the past. Zuko continued to gaze at the great man with wonder until he heard a voice and turned to see Maria, his caretaker. Maria cautioned Zuko not to wander too far and greeted Male. Male, recognizing Zuko as the son of the man who had once bested him, recalled their past encounter, where he had fought Issei without using his powers, resulting in a humiliating defeat that still haunted him. He asked Maria where Issei was, and she sensed his presence in the Greek pantheon, wondering what he might be doing there. Back with Issei, he arrived at Mount Olympus, where the gods were gathered. Zeus welcomed them, and Poseidon acknowledged Loki's presence, noting that he had brought Issei along. Hades reminded Poseidon to be respectful, recalling a time when Issei had bested him. Issei greeted the gods respectfully, but Poseidon was irritated that Issei had only referred to him as Mr. instead of Lord. Issei reminded him of their last encounter, which left Poseidon feeling humiliated. Zeus invited Issei to join them and promised to show him the weapon, hoping he would be worthy of wielding it and not end up burned like his sons, Hercules and Hades. Issei was surprised to hear that those two had been burned, questioning how that could happen to the strongest of Zeus's children. Zeus explained that while they were powerful, their pride often led them astray. Upon entering the weapon chamber, a powerful gust of heat rushed out, forcing them to close the doors again. Issei was taken aback by the intense heat, and Loki explained that the weapon inside was capable of defeating the creatures they faced. However, the overwhelming heat had evaporated the weapon's protective measures, resulting in burns on both Loki and Zeus's hands when they had tried to retrieve it. Issei questioned whether he was truly the right person to wield such a weapon, but both Loki and Zeus assured him he was special, with or without his sacred gear, urging him not to let Baldur's sacrifice be in vain. Issei stood determined in front of the door, enveloping his entire body in a dark aura that left everyone surprised, as they were unaware of this ability he possessed. He proceeded to open the doors, releasing an intense and suffocating heat. The gods quickly acted a barrier, but it wouldn't hold for long. In front of Issei were two swords emanating deadly heat. He grasped the dual swords with both hands but quickly released them as his body began to burn, letting out a cry of pain. Yet this did not deter him. He seized the swords again, this time encased in Mjolnir gloves. Despite this, he still felt the searing pain in his flesh and noticed the gloves starting to crack as they fused with the swords. Chains then wrapped around both of his arms. Issei let out a roar of agony, feeling as if his very soul was being scorched. Meanwhile, back in the heavens, the little Zuko was playing with Maria. Suddenly, he began to cry, causing concern for Maria. She asked him what was wrong, but Zuko continued to cry loudly, drawing the attention of the other angels and heightening Maria's worry. Maria was in complete astonishment as the first words from the little one were about his father, but why was he crying? Something must have happened to his father. Meanwhile, Issei found himself in a completely dark place, floating in nothingness as a blue fire slowly burned around him. Suddenly, he heard the sound of a child crying, which caught his attention. Issei shouted out, calling for Zuko. Zuko was calling for his father, sniffling as he did. Issei vowed that he would not leave his little one alone. He had promised his wife that he would always protect him and never abandon him. Gradually, the flames around him began to recede, and a golden light appeared in his eyes. The gods sensed Issei's energy diminishing and feared losing their friend. However, moments later, they felt his energy return, though it was different now. They no longer sensed the fierce flames, and they dispelled the barrier to enter the room. There, they saw him standing shirtless, with swords in both hands and chains wrapped around his arms. When Issei turned to face them, they could feel the power of a primordial within him. He had achieved something significant, but before he could collapse, Loki caught him. Loki praised Issei for his efforts and told him to rest as he deserved it. Zeus expressed his surprise, while Hades noted how Issei's aura was changing, his human side fading and being replaced by that of a primordial. Loki remarked that Issei never wanted to become a supernatural being again, and now he had transformed into a primordial. He hoped that when Issei awakened, he wouldn't be angry for not mentioning this small detail. Zeus questioned Loki about whether he had informed Issei that he would become a primordial if the swords accepted him. Loki admitted that he had withheld that information, fearing Issei would not have agreed to join him otherwise. Hades warned that once Issei woke up and learned the truth, they might need to find a new god to take charge of Asgard. Loki playfully threatened to reveal what they did at night outside of Greece to their wives. In the sky, Zuko had stopped crying. He wiped his tears with his little hands and crawled over to Maria, reaching for her dress. She looked down and saw him lifting his hands, asking to be picked up. Once in her arms, he fell asleep with a smile. Maria noted the connection between Zuko and his father. A week had passed since Issei obtained the swords, but he had yet to awaken. He was placed in a room, cared for periodically by Maria and Tiamat. When they learned of his condition, their fury was directed solely at Loki, who received one of the worst beatings of his life and was left on the brink of death. During Issei's slumber, the creatures that had been attacking ceased their assaults, which raised suspicion. The factions, upon discovering the condition of their friend, attempted to approach him, but they were unable to do so due to the prohibition against entering Greece. In Issei's room, he lay peacefully on the bed, the swords never leaving his side. Minor gods, in their arrogance, attempted to take the swords, only to be burned in the process. Others tried to harm their bearer, but the swords, sensing their master's danger, released a wave of heat that miraculously did not affect Issei but harmed the others. When Zeus learned of this, he was far from pleased, especially since some of his children claimed that the mortal did not deserve to wield such weapons and that they were more worthy. Another issue arose when Thor's wife attempted to enter Issei's room to poison him for what he had done to her husband. When Loki found out, he had no choice but to imprison her in Asgard for attempted murder. Currently, all the gods from Olympus, as well as the Aztec, Egyptian, Japanese, and Asgardian deities, were gathered for a meeting to discuss the recent events. Only the leaders of each faction were present. Zeus asked the gentlemen if there were any issues with the creatures that day. Loki replied that it was as if they had surrendered or were plotting something. Susanoo noted that in his territory, those creatures had stopped attacking overnight, which was strange and suggested they were planning something. Tonatiuh expressed uncertainty but emphasized the need to remain alert for any surprise attacks from the enemy. Ra agreed with Tonatiuh, stressing the importance of being prepared for any assault. He also mentioned that the young man had awakened. An uncomfortable silence fell over the group, and Loki was the first to speak again. He stated that the young man had not yet awakened, despite their efforts to rouse him. Tonatiuh suggested that the boy was undergoing a trial involving his inner demons, as he had a part of himself shrouded in darkness and was likely battling that entity for control of his body. Susanoo questioned Tonatiuh's certainty. Tonatiuh explained that his brother, who governed the moon and dreams, had entered the boy's mind and witnessed him fighting against a dark version of himself. After that, his brother had been expelled from the dream and could no longer access it. Ra summarized that the boy was indeed fighting against his darker self for control. Zeus acknowledged this, stating they just had to wait until the boy triumphed and awakened, as he was growing weary of the other beings who had attempted to approach Issei, including his daughters, who constantly asked to marry him. Loki shared that he faced a similar situation with his daughter, his older sister, and Thor's daughter all requesting permission to marry Issei. However, he reminded them that it was ultimately Issei's decision whether to accept them or not, and knowing him, he would likely refuse. He warned that they knew how the girls reacted to a no answer. Susanoo recounted how his sisters had nearly destroyed the Japanese faction in the past after being rejected by Issei. Something dark had grown within them, leading to an obsession, and with the help of his parents and brothers, they had to seal them away to prevent danger. Ra admitted he had to do the same with his daughters, and although it pained him, it was for a greater good and to encourage them to reflect on their actions. Tonatiuh mentioned a certain dragon who wouldn't stop insisting that she would be a more worthy mother for the young boy than the others. Loki, trembling with fear, pleaded for them not to mention those girls. Before he could ask why, a soldier burst into the room, bloodied and breathless. The soldier reported that they were under attack. Zeus inquired who was attacking them. The soldier explained that they were being assaulted by countless creatures and ice giants who had taken the city of Athens and were now heading their way. He bore a wound from an ice sword in his back, and behind him, one of those creatures had been struck down by a powerful lightning bolt. Zeus commanded everyone to return to their realms and protect them. Each god went to their respective factions, while some chose to stay. Loki instructed Heimdall to close the portal, and Heimdall complied. As they stepped outside, they were astonished to see thousands of those creatures, and Loki was shocked to see the ice giants. He exclaimed that those giants were supposed to have been eradicated. Zeus addressed the group, stating that this battle would be challenging due to their overwhelming numbers. Even though they were gods, they might not survive the encounter, but they would fight to defend their friend. Issei, having just awakened, expressed his appreciation for Zeus's words but insisted they would not fight alone. The others were surprised to see him awake and asked when he had come to. Issei explained that he had just awakened moments ago, heard an explosion and the sounds of battle, and now found himself before them. He told Loki that they would have much to discuss after they dealt with the current situation. Loki realized Issei had sensed his aura. Issei playfully slapped Loki, who acknowledged he deserved it, only to receive another slap. He asked why Issei had slapped him again, to which Issei replied it was simply because he felt like it and asked what they were facing. Zeus pointed behind him at the approaching ice creatures. Issei sighed, bracing himself for what lay ahead, and remarked that it would be a long day for him. Issei asked about the current situation and how long he had been asleep. Loki informed him that he had been unconscious for over a week and that they were completely surrounded. The lesser gods had fled in cowardice, but soldiers were arriving with a wounded Ares and Hercules. Zeus inquired about their condition, and a soldier explained that both had attempted to defeat the enemy alone and had been severely defeated. Ares had lost an arm and Hercules a leg, and they had abandoned their men on the battlefield. Issei approached the two gods, who looked at him, but before they could speak, he knocked their heads together, rendering them unconscious. He then removed their armor and donned it himself. He declared that they were not worthy of being called gods, as a true god does not abandon their men in battle. The others remained silent, knowing the truth of his words, while Zeus shook his head, realizing the shame his sons had brought upon themselves. After some time, Issei was ready for battle. He announced to Zeus that he would borrow the armor of his sons and promised to return it after the fight. Zeus, seeing Issei's determination, suggested that he keep the armor, as he would be more deserving of it. Issei maintained a stoic expression, but inside he was smiling. He thanked Zeus and stated that he had a battle to lead, men to guide to victory, and many enemies to defeat. With that, he took a deep breath and leaped from the edge of the mountain. Loki remarked on Issei's bravery, while Zeus expressed his happiness at being called father, and reminded everyone of their past wager. Susanoo and Hades reacted with disbelief at the situation. On the battlefield, Issei's arrival caught everyone's attention. A soldier exclaimed that their god Ares had come to help, but Issei clarified that he was not Ares and that the god was currently unavailable. When questioned about the armor he wore, Issei explained that he had borrowed it and urged them to stop talking and focus on winning the war. He charged at the Ice Walkers, using one as a shield while sweeping the others aside. He commanded the soldiers to attack, but a captain refused to follow him, insisting they would only follow their gods. Issei seized the captain by the neck, warning him that his god had abandoned them like a coward. He ordered the captain to either fight or leave the battlefield, taking a shield and spear from him. The captain protested, claiming they belonged to his ancestor, King Leonidas of Sparta, but Issei declared that he was more worthy of them. He then charged at the enemy, quickly defeating 5 of them with the spear while using the shield to deflect arrows. Suddenly, a memory surged in his mind, and he began to strike his shield repeatedly. An incredible phenomenon occurred, leaving everyone, including the gods, in awe. Spectral shields surrounded Issei, and hundreds of arrows fell from the sky, taking down over 10,000 Ice Walkers. He declared that the massacre had begun. The soldiers were frozen in fear as they witnessed the gruesome scene. The battlefield was littered with bodies, some dismembered and others unrecognizable, while the ground was stained with blue blood. Issei stood amidst the carnage, his expression serious, with the bloodied swords of chaos on his back. The once mighty army of 50,000 Ice Walkers had dwindled to a mere 1,000, who fled in terror to report to their queen. Issei watched as the remaining enemies retreated, not bothering to pursue them. He turned and made his way back to Olympus, with soldiers parting ways for him out of fear. Slowly, he ascended the mountain steps toward the gods. The spectators were speechless, never having imagined that Issei could cause such devastation. Some lesser gods felt a chill at the sight of his power, while Issei appeared unfazed, merely bored as he continued his ascent. Upon reaching the summit, he fell to his knees and began to cry. He apologized for losing control of his emotions and revealing his true self, something he had kept hidden for a long time. Zeus embraced him, offering comfort and reassurance. Issei cried on his shoulder until he calmed down. He promised that once everything was over, he would share every detail with them. But for now, he wanted to see his son. He asked Zeus to take him to the heavens, as he was still unfamiliar with his new powers and abilities. Zeus agreed, instructing Issei to hold on tightly as they would travel quickly. In a flash of light, they disappeared and reappeared in the sky, where Issei sensed the presence of his child. He raced toward the source, only to find a beautiful woman bathing with a 1-year-old baby who was reaching for her. Maria was enjoying a moment with little Suko, who was eager for milk. However, sensing Zeus's presence and Issei's energy, Maria quickly grabbed a towel, but it was too late. Issei admired the sight before him, marveling at her beauty. Maria, blushing fiercely, screamed in embarrassment and threw the nearest object at Issei, knocking him unconscious. Just then, Mael and Jesus arrived, drawn by Maria's shout, only to witness the aftermath of the scene. Issei lay on the ground, a trickle of blood from his nose, having been knocked out by a bucket. Maria, wrapped in a towel, looked concerned. Jesus, puzzled, wondered what had happened and why there was a commotion. Maria urged her son to help his future father by taking him to a room to rest while she tended to his future sibling. With a sigh, Jesus, along with Mael, lifted the heavy Issei and began to drag him away. Just then, Zeus arrived, ready to speak, but before he could say anything, Michael appeared, accompanied by Gabriel, Irina, and Griselda. Zeus remarked on the arrival of the 4 companions, acknowledging their presence with a hint of sarcasm. Chapter end. 6 hours after the events in the sky, Maria lay on a bed beside Issei, who was still asleep. Their son rested on Issei's chest, also in slumber. Maria gently caressed Issei's cheek and played with his soft hair, thinking how much both he and their son loved to sleep. Issei murmured in his sleep, expressing how much he missed Astrid, a tear escaping his eye. Maria paused her gentle caress, rising from the bed to head toward the door. She knew Issei still missed Astrid, but she was determined to mend his heart. As she opened the door, Michael stumbled in, startled by being discovered, and quickly ran away. Maria sighed, wondering what to do with the children, who always seemed to find trouble. She thought that if Astrid were here, she would know how to handle them properly. Then, she heard a familiar voice she hadn't heard in a long time. Turning around, she saw Sister Teresa. Maria greeted her, noting how long it had been since they last met. Teresa replied that it had indeed been a while and inquired about their guest. Maria informed her that Issei was still sleeping soundly, just like their son. Teresa asked about their other guest, and Maria explained that he had returned to his realm to handle matters with his friends. Meanwhile, in the Greek pantheon, Zeus sat atop a mountain of gold, grinning broadly. Loki, Susanoo, and Hades remarked that they would never bet against him again. Zeus laughed, declaring that he would give half of his winnings to his son and grandson, reveling in his victory. Back in the sky, Maria and Teresa were enjoying tea when Mael rushed in, kneeling before Maria. He informed her that Issei had just awakened and wanted to see her immediately, as he had something important to discuss. Maria stood and walked slowly toward Issei. In the room, Issei and Suko sat facing each other. Issei encouraged his son to say, "Papa." Suko attempted to speak, calling out, "Mama," instead. Issei gently corrected him, urging him to try again. After several attempts, Suko finally managed to walk toward his father, who was overwhelmed with emotion at witnessing his son's accomplishment. Maria entered the room just in time to see Issei in tears of joy, and Tsuko reaching for her dress, calling her Mama. Maria was filled with happiness, recognizing her role as a mother to the little one. Issei couldn't believe that Tsuko had called Maria Mama, knowing it was bound to happen since she had cared for him so much. Unbeknownst to them, Gabriel watched from a distance, tears streaming down her face. She felt a mix of anger and jealousy toward Maria, having tried to get close to Issei's son but being thwarted. Gabriel vowed that she would not allow Maria to take Issei away from her and decided to inform the other girls of her plans. Meanwhile, Jesus overheard Gabriel's thoughts and resolved to protect his mother, determined not to let anyone harm her. Back in the room, Issei asked Maria for a significant favor. He explained that he needed her to tell Michael to speak with the other faction leaders while he would reach out to others to form a temporary alliance against their common enemy. He realized he had only defeated a fraction of the enemy's forces and would need everyone's help. He also mentioned wanting to reconnect with some old friends, including Claus, as he had mysteriously lost contact with him. Maria agreed to help but shyly requested a favor in return. Issei, curious, awaited her request. Maria, blushing, stammered that she wanted to go on a date with him. Issei smiled and agreed, saying they could have their date once everything was settled. Maria felt a rush of joy, knowing that everything was falling into place, and soon she would be married to the man she loved. Just then, Jesus arrived, asking to speak with Issei alone. Maria took Tsuko and left the room. Jesus informed Issei that Gabriel was plotting something with the other girls and that he sensed jealousy emanating from her. Issei acknowledged that the girls were being immature but decided to postpone that issue for another time. He suggested organizing a meeting with all factions and the main gods. As they prepared to leave, Issei donned his armor, the swords of chaos gleaming brightly. In a future scene, Issei found himself surrounded by countless foes, blood trickling from his body, fatigue weighing him down. Before him stood a creature of ice, watching him with amusement. Issei declared that he would not give up, as he still had much to live for. He stood tall, grasping his swords, which radiated immense power. Though he stumbled and fell, he refused to stay down, determined to rise again. Just then, a communication circle buzzed in his ear. Location: Russia, retirement home. In a room, the former leader of the Soviet Union was seemingly cleaning some knives. The Soviet leader remarked to his old friend that he wondered if he had ever been taught to knock. Issei replied that manners were not his strong suit. The Soviet leader then asked what brought Issei to this place, pouring 2 glasses of vodka and offering one to his old friend. Issei explained that he had come to ask for help. The Soviet leader inquired what kind of help he needed. Issei stated that he wanted to prevent the planet from becoming a frozen wasteland. The Soviet leader expressed regret, saying he could not help this time, as he was no longer as young as before, and he doubted his son, Russia, would assist either. Anticipating this response, Issei revealed that he had borrowed something from the heavens without anyone noticing, placing a vial with a red liquid on the table. The Soviet leader asked what it was. Issei explained that it was a type of enhancer that could rejuvenate and grant the strength of 100 men to whoever drank it. The Soviet leader reached for the vial, but Issei was quicker and took it first. The Soviet leader then insisted on having the vial. Issei handed it over, and the Soviet leader consumed the contents in one gulp, feeling his body grow heavy and his breath quicken. At that moment, a man entered the room and, seeing his father in distress, pointed a weapon at Issei. Russia demanded to know what Issei had done to his father. Issei urged him to calm down and put the weapon down, warning that he might hurt someone. He swiftly took the AK-47 from Russia's hands. As Russia attempted to help his father, Issei told him to just watch what would happen next. After about 10 minutes, the noise ceased, and before anyone could open the door, it was suddenly destroyed. A young man in his 30s emerged from the room. The Soviet leader remarked that they had much work ahead and it was time to gather the team. He picked up the AK-47 from the floor and, as if it were made of paper, broke it in half before pulling out a cigarette from his pocket and lighting it. Issei noted that they would now need to find Rodolfo. The Soviet leader then questioned his son about attacking Ukraine, asking what she had done to deserve it. Russia replied that he thought it would be a way to restore his father's reign and make him proud. The Soviet leader reassured him that he was already proud of the man he had become, but urged him to stop the foolish attack. Issei observed the exchange between father and son, finding it amusing how Russia tried to hide the slight blush on his face. Russia insisted that his life choices were none of his father's business. However, in his attempt to retrieve a photo that had fallen from his pocket, the Soviet leader picked it up and, upon seeing it, teased Russia about it being a picture of Ukraine with the words, "My beautiful Ukraine, how I love you." Russia demanded the photo back, claiming it was personal, but the Soviet leader, being taller, easily held it out of reach. The Soviet leader chuckled, noting that the girl was just as lovely as Russia's mother. Russia paused for a moment, looking at his father in confusion. The Soviet leader then mentioned that he had never told Russia about his mother and suggested that he reveal her identity to put an end to the madness, as she wielded a certain power that could not be underestimated. Before he could say more, he was suddenly grabbed by the collar and thrown into a portal. Issei stated that he would take the Soviet leader to help him with something and promised to return him later. They entered the portal, which then closed. Somewhere in Iceland, a portal opened, and the Soviet leader fell to the ground, while Issei wore a serious expression. The Soviet leader complained that he was about to reveal to his son who his mother was. Issei replied that it would have to wait, as they needed to find Rodolfo and Braum. The Soviet leader asked what had happened to the old man. Issei explained that he was enjoying retirement with his wife in Miami and, seeing him so happy, he decided not to disturb him and instead sought the Soviet leader's help. The Soviet leader inquired if Issei knew where they were. Issei confirmed that Braum was in Iceland with his wife and Rodolfo was in Egypt. The Soviet leader was surprised and asked what Rodolfo was doing in Egypt. Issei assured him that he would find out when they arrived. They ventured into the forest to search for their old friend. After a few minutes, they found Braum, who was cornered by icy walkers, bearing wounds and a sword embedded in his side, while a woman held a tightly embraced baby behind him. Issei urged the Soviet leader to help, drawing their swords as the Soviet leader readied a blade. Braum declared that he would not let the monsters harm his wife and child, raising his shield and striking the ground, creating a freezing wave that pushed the walkers back, but he was hit by 4 arrows in his back, letting out a cry of pain. Just as one of the walkers prepared to strike him down, a sword pierced its chest, and it collapsed, its head rolling away. The remaining walkers, seeing their leader defeated, were about to attack the unknown savior but were met with powerful blows and cuts that caused blue liquid to spill from their wounds. Braum thanked them for their help, nearly collapsing, but Issei caught him, telling him to just rest. Issei then asked the woman her name. She introduced herself as May, Braum's wife, and the baby was named Izzy. Issei requested permission to enter their home to treat Braum's wounds, assuring her that he would take care of it while the Soviet leader carried Braum effortlessly inside. Issei prepared himself, cracking his knuckles and drawing his dual swords, ready for the challenges ahead. A battle cry echoed through the air, signaling the start of an intense confrontation. The warriors, fueled by determination and courage, prepared to face their adversaries. Each one felt the weight of their mission, knowing that victory was essential for their cause. As they charged forward, the ground trembled beneath their feet, and the atmosphere crackled with tension. The clash of swords rang out as they engaged in combat, their movements swift and precise. With every strike, they fought not just for themselves but for their comrades and the future they envisioned. The air was thick with the sounds of battle, a symphony of bravery and resolve. In the midst of the chaos, one warrior stood out, their spirit unyielding. They navigated through the fray with grace, their eyes focused on the goal ahead. The determination in their heart burned brightly, driving them to push through the challenges they faced. As the battle raged on, the warriors drew strength from one another, united in their quest. Each moment brought them closer to their objective, and they fought with everything they had, embodying the true essence of courage and camaraderie. Zeus instructed his son to look to his left. Issei turned and saw a gigantic portal opening, revealing Zeus, his brothers, and a massive army. Several more portals opened, showcasing each faction with their respective warriors. Issei was astonished, while his enemies appeared somewhat anxious, and the creature among them seemed angered by this occurrence. Issei felt the tension rise, ready for the true battle to begin. At that moment, Issei was more serious than usual, especially with his former friend Griselda and Gabriel watching him closely, along with the small Suko, who was in Maria's arms. He demanded to know their purpose for being in his presence. Irina explained that they wanted to know if he could give them a second chance to fix things and reunite. Issei declined, stating he did not believe in second chances and suggested they return to their prince, the blonde one. Griselda pleaded, wanting to repair their past mistakes, even kneeling before him. Issei firmly told them it was too late, 10 years too late. Gabriel questioned why he allowed Maria to stay by his side, given her betrayal. Maria defended herself, stating she had never agreed to keep secrets from Issei and that he had learned the truth through other means. Suddenly, Jesus appeared, revealing he was the one who informed Issei, as their actions were foolish. He added they were fortunate that the bracelets had prevented them from falling into deeper trouble. Irina and Griselda were confused by his actions, to which Jesus explained it was the right thing to do, but he was interrupted by a swift reprimand from his mother, causing him to faint. Maria asked Mail to take her son to his room, speaking sweetly. Mail quickly complied, carrying his friend away. Issei, puzzled by the last comment, asked Maria what it meant, but she dismissed it, telling him it was nothing important. He nodded, deciding to speak with her son later. After some time, the three women, having received no positive response from Issei, decided to try again another day. Issei found himself in Michael's office, where Michael looked at him with a nervous smile, feeling intimidated by Issei's aura and newfound power. Issei urged Michael to speak, wanting to leave, as his presence only made him think of preparing a dish involving pigeons. Michael felt offended by the remark, knowing it referenced a dish from Peru. He explained that a meeting would take place in 5 days at Olympus at Zeus's request, with Surzek, Azazel, Yasaka, and Valerie Teeps agreeing to attend. Issei, ready to leave, stated he had matters to attend to and warned Michael to keep his sister and her friends away from his son, or else the heavens would need to find a new leader. Michael assured him he would keep a close watch on them. Feeling Michael's sincerity, Issei left, slamming the door behind him, causing the office to shake. Michael sighed, standing up to wipe away tears, securing the door. A light surrounded him, revealing a feminine figure, and he took out an old photo of Issei, kissing it gently. Micheli hoped that one day Issei would forgive her, vowing to be patient until the right moment to reveal her identity. Issei was preparing to search for certain individuals who had helped him 5 years ago. Once ready, he kissed his son on the forehead and Maria on the cheek, causing her to blush and daydream about him. Inside the cabin, the Soviet remarked that it should be enough. May expressed her doubts about whether his friend could handle all of them alone. The Soviet reassured her, saying that he had everything under control. Suddenly, they noticed one of the walkers entering the house. Before the Soviet could grab his knife to deal with it, a fist broke through the wall, and the walker was taken by the top of its head, losing the upper part in a swift motion, leaving the other half lifeless on the ground. May felt a bit queasy at the brutal end of the walker, while the Soviet experienced a twinge of fear, grateful to be a friend rather than an enemy, knowing there would be no mercy. 20 minutes later, the sounds of battle had ceased, and they saw Issei, covered in blue blood, enter the house. He grabbed a towel courtesy of the Soviet and wiped some of the blood off his armor before removing it to reveal his body covered in cuts and wounds that began to heal quickly. He cleaned his face and upper body, then asked if their sleeping beauty had awakened. May replied that he had not, mentioning that her husband sometimes slept heavily and, after fainting, she doubted he would wake up soon. Issei then asked May if he could use her kitchen, to which she agreed, guiding him there. Issei donned an apron and asked them to wait a moment while he prepared something that would surely wake their friend. The Soviet inquired about what Issei planned to make, pointing at Braum, who was skinning his thumb. May mentioned that Issei had said something about making cookies. The Soviet's eyes lit up with genuine joy, and although May didn't understand why he was so happy, she would soon find out. 30 minutes later, Issei emerged from the kitchen with a covered tray and a jug of fresh milk. He declared that there was only one thing in the world capable of waking their friend up suddenly, and he was lucky that Mrs. Santa had taught him the recipe. The The Soviet's mouth watered, and Braum began to sniff something delicious. Noticing this, issei smiled and lamented that it was a shame one man wouldn't be able to join them to enjoy the feast. He uncovered the tray to reveal many cookies emitting a hypnotic aroma. Mei commented on how good they smelled and asked what they were called. Issei replied that they were poro cookies, and offered one to Mei and another to the Soviet, who took several and poured some fresh milk to accompany the treat. Issei then noted that only one cookie remained, but before he could finish his thought, he received a shout and a punch that sent him crashing against the wall. Braum claimed the last cookie for himself, eager to devour it. Issei remarked that he was fortunate to have made more. Braum settled down to enjoy his cookies in the company of his wife and friends, reflecting on good times and good friends, wondering what they needed from him. Issei quickly explained that they needed his help because his nephew Claus had disappeared weeks ago, and the creatures known as the Frozen Walkers had appeared. He pointed out how strong they were, noting that even other factions were struggling against them, which is why he requested Braum's assistance. Braum stood up from the sofa and walked over to the photos on the wall, where he saw himself with his wife and a little girl in his arms, all looking happy. He agreed to help, but only if his wife and daughter would be safe from these creatures, as he could not bear the thought of anything bad happening to them. He then walked to a crib to see his little Joy sleeping peacefully with a smile, hugging a doll resembling him with a big mustache. Issei reassured him that they would be safe in Olympus, under the protection of his father and friends. After that, they stepped outside, and Braum took his large shield. Before departing, he said goodbye to his wife, placing a kiss on her lips and a gentle kiss on the forehead of their daughter, who giggled with joy. Issei opened a transportation circle, one leading to Olympus and another to Egypt. Once in Egypt, they walked for a while until they reached a temple, and what they saw left both the Soviet and Braum in awe. It was Rodolfo, but resting on his chest was one of Anubis's daughters. Issei greeted Rodolfo and asked how long he had been dating his girlfriend. Rodolfo responded with surprise, questioning when Issei had arrived and who she was. Brea introduced herself as the fourth daughter of Anubis, and Issei counted down from 3, 2, 1. Both Braum and the Soviet fainted from the shock. Issei remarked on their dramatic reactions. Issei was chatting comfortably with Rodolfo about the wedding and who among them would be the best man, while the others remained unconscious, still reeling from the revelation that their friend, the self-proclaimed lone deer, had a girlfriend. Issei inquired about how long they had been together. Rodolfo explained that he had met her by chance during one of his travels, and it was love at first sight. Brea shared her initial thoughts about Rodolfo, noting how he was different from other men who focused solely on appearances. She found it amusing to see how he tried to win her over. Issei asked how Rodolfo had managed to capture the heart of such a beautiful lady. Brea mentioned that it took time and that they faced some challenges together. When she told her parents, her father chased Rodolfo around the temple. Rodolfo humorously recalled how close he came to being turned into a deer by his father-in-law, expressing his gratitude that he was still there to kiss Brea. Suddenly, they heard a noise and saw the Soviet, who complained about a headache and shared a bizarre dream he had about the lone deer having a girlfriend and planning to marry. Braum chimed in, mentioning he had the same dream and was relieved it was just that, a dream. Issei pointed out that it was all real, gesturing to the happy couple embracing each other. Both Braum and the Soviet could only express disbelief, thinking it must be a bad dream. They simultaneously punched themselves in the face, only to collide with a pillar. When they realized it wasn't a dream, they sighed in exhaustion and pain. Now, everyone was seated, discussing trivial matters like the wedding date, the bachelor party, the honeymoon, and who would be the uncle to the child they would bring into the world. Rodolfo and Brea were slightly blushing at the topics being discussed. Rodolfo asked what brought them there, and the atmosphere turned serious as Issei responded, explaining the situation they were facing. Rodolfo acknowledged the challenges posed by the ice creatures that were difficult to defeat. Issei explained that he was asking for help, just like in the old days, as a great war was approaching, and he planned to form a temporary alliance with other factions. Rodolfo expressed disbelief, reminding Issei of what those cowards had done to him, questioning why he would want to help them. Issei clarified that it would be temporary, and once they defeated the cause of their troubles, everything would return to normal for them, at least. Rodolfo agreed but warned that if any of those creatures pushed him too far, he would take action. Issei darkly stated that he wouldn't mind using them as shields if the opportunity arose, which unsettled those present, leading them to agree never to anger him. After their discussion, Rodolfo had to say goodbye to his beloved, promising that they would marry upon his return. Brea kissed him and warned the others that if anything happened to her beloved, they would face her wrath and that of her mother, which sent chills down their spines. With that, Issei created a portal to their next destination. Braum asked who would be joining the team next. Issei replied that they would meet a friend he had made during his travels, who owed him a favor, along with 2 other friends and a sweet-toothed individual. They arrived at their destination, and the Soviet noticed something. He questioned why they were in Germany. Issei explained that their next ally was a genius capable of creating a particle accelerator from scratch. They entered an academy and were noticed by the students until they reached an auditorium where a man was teaching. Edward greeted his students and then rushed to embrace Issei, expressing how long it had been since they last saw each other. Issei mentioned that many things had happened, but today he was there to collect the favor Edward owed him. Edward agreed, quickly telling his students they had the day off and could go home. Once the students left, he ensured the doors were locked and changed into a different outfit before stepping back out. Issei sat in a lotus position, staring at a man in front of him who was enjoying some sweets. He asked if Buddha would join them for the upcoming battle. Buddha replied that it depended on how many sweets he would receive as payment. Issei promised to prepare the most delicious sweets in the world and an almost endless supply from the North Pole. Buddha liked the terms and agreed to join. They needed to find Sun Wukong and Shiva next. Buddha reminded Issei that Shiva would only agree to join if he won a fight against him, while Wukong would need something he liked to be persuaded. Issei assured Buddha that he had a plan for Shiva and pulled out a small vial of golden liquid, which made Buddha laugh, realizing how clever Issei was. Issei explained that he had borrowed it from the Phoenix family, confident they wouldn't mind since he didn't think they were worthy of such an elixir. They set off to find the others before heading to their meeting. Buddha savored the homemade sweets Issei had prepared, enjoying each bite. Issei expressed disbelief at how Buddha could eat so many sweets daily without any consequences. Buddha simply replied that it was a Buddhist secret. Once outside the temple, they walked to a fighting arena and stood aside to watch Braum, who was battered and mumbling incoherently. Issei noted that Shiva had been a bit rough with him. As they entered the arena, Issei observed Lenin fighting on par with Shiva, but soon he became overconfident and ended up pinned against the wall. Shiva taunted Lenin about his former lovers, which only made Issei feel indifferent and disgusted. Buddha warned Shiva not to provoke Issei, but Shiva dismissed the warning. Issei insisted that nothing Shiva said could anger him anymore, claiming he was no longer a child. Shiva, however, hinted at knowing a secret about Issei, which shifted the atmosphere to a more serious tone. Issei demanded to know where Shiva had heard that rumor about him having a child. Shiva explained that the demonic faction and fallen angels often couldn't keep secrets, especially when women spoke openly. Issei expressed frustration at those who couldn't keep quiet. Shiva suggested visiting Issei's child, smirking at the thought of what he might do. Seeing Issei clench his fists in anger, Buddha tried to intervene, but fell silent as Issei's aura intensified. Issei declared that he was now truly angry and prepared to confront Shiva. He removed the chains from his arms and handed his swords to Buddha for safekeeping. Indra, who was present, stated that magic was allowed for their duel but warned against lethal force. Issei had a brilliant idea and used an illusion spell to trap Indra without him realizing it. Just as the fight was about to begin, Issei grabbed Indra by the neck and created a magical circle behind him, transporting them to space, where a black hole threatened Indra's existence. Indra screamed in fear, only to find himself back in the arena, confused but soon laughing at the trick. Issei explained that one of his strongest spells created an illusion where everything felt real. Indra, realizing it was just an illusion, begged Issei not to use it again. Issei sighed, regretting using that technique, but felt his power growing stronger. They continued their mission, needing to find someone else located in the North Pole. Meanwhile, in the sky, Jesus had awakened from unconsciousness after being used as a punching bag by his own mother. The memory sent chills down his spine. Back in Maria's room, she slept peacefully beside Suko, who was also resting comfortably. Unbeknownst to them, an angel entered with malicious intent but was stopped by Mael, who was reading nearby. Mael confronted Gabriel, questioning her intentions as she brandished a dagger with a recognizable liquid Samuel's blood. Gabriel demanded the dagger back, claiming she needed it to eliminate Maria, who she believed was trying to take what was rightfully hers. Mael refused to hand it over and warned her to leave or he would call for help. Frustrated, Gabriel stormed out, vowing to try again when no one was watching. In Asgard, Loki was agitated after hearing from guards that his older sister, Hela, the goddess of death, had escaped from her prison. He lamented that the day couldn't get any worse and hoped Issei would find his allies and return soon. Issei wondered how Edward managed to change so quickly. Edward revealed that it was a scientist's secret and asked Issei to introduce his friends. Issei introduced Edward Richtofen, a professor and doctor who had successfully created a functional teleport. Unfortunately, the government had taken it away, but with Issei's help, they managed to recover it in a rather unconventional manner. Rodolfo chimed in, admitting that they had essentially taken it back. Edward confirmed that it was the only way, and after retrieving the device, he dismantled it, explaining that it could be dangerous in the wrong hands, as it could lead to disastrous consequences. Issei encouraged everyone to introduce themselves. Rodolfo introduced himself as Rodolfo Winter, expressing his pleasure in meeting them. Braum proudly declared himself as the great and powerful Braum, stating that his shield would always protect the weak. Lenin mentioned his past as the leader of the URSS. Edward expressed his pleasure in meeting everyone and asked Issei how he could repay the favor. Issei explained that a war was about to break out, and he needed Edward's help to defeat the one responsible for it, ensuring that his son could grow up away from the supernatural. Edward agreed to help, excited to finally test one of his latest inventions. He opened a drawer from his desk and pulled out a rather peculiar weapon. He introduced his latest creation, the ray gun, and accidentally fired it, creating a large hole in the wall. Edward quickly realized he had forgotten to set it to a lower power. Issei and his companions were at the North Pole, trudging through a fierce snowstorm. Indra complained about the cold, expressing his discomfort. Issei reminded him that he had warned him to dress warmly, but Indra had chosen not to listen, leaving him to suffer the consequences. The others were bundled up, with the exception of Braum, who was accustomed to the cold, and Issei, who relied on his resilience and the warmth from his swords. After a considerable time, they reached their destination, only to find chaos around them. Issei outlined the plan, but Lenin suggested they charge in without fear. Issei corrected him, trying to clarify the strategy, but Buddha interrupted, urging everyone to charge ahead. With that, they rushed into the fray, leaving Issei and Braum to sigh at their friend's childish behavior. They followed suit, knowing they had to help. The scene was chaotic, with Indra and Buddha fighting side by side against the walkers, while Richtofen and Lenin fired at close range. Rodolfo used his fists, and Issei and Braum wielded their weapons skillfully. Moments later, the area lay in ruins, the walkers completely defeated by the team. Issei then stated they needed to find the Christmas bodybuilder to uncover what had happened, believing he held the answers. As they entered the facility, they discovered many elves trapped in blocks of ice and imprisoned in icy cells. Eventually, they reached Santa's office, where they found him encased in a pillar of pure ice. Issei instructed everyone to step aside, preparing to melt the ice. He drew his swords, igniting them in intense flames, and the heat began to melt the ice gradually. After some time, Santa Claus lay unconscious on a sofa, covered by a blanket. Indra remarked on Santa's impressive physique, while Buddha expressed surprise at his appearance, having expected a jolly figure. Issei explained that Santa had been forced onto a diet, monitored closely by his wife to avoid sweets. Richtofen asked how they would wake Santa, having tried everything. Issei suggested something they hadn't yet attempted, looking at Rodolfo. Rodolfo protested, recalling a past incident that he wished to avoid. Issei insisted that Rodolfo was the only one capable of preparing it. The others were confused, except for a Soviet who understood and turned pale at the thought. Lenin questioned whether Issei intended to use that method to wake Santa. Issei confirmed it, pointing to the unconscious figure and urging Rodolfo to do it for Santa's sake. Rodolfo sighed, resigned, and headed to the kitchen, warning them not to peek. In the kitchen, the sound of a blender whirred. 10 minutes later, Rodolfo returned with a tray holding a bright red smoothie. Indra questioned whether a strawberry smoothie could really wake Santa. Lenin decided to leave before another explosion occurred. Braum offered to accompany him, suggesting Buddha join them to avoid the impending chaos. Issei instructed Rodolfo to pour the smoothie into Santa's mouth and then escape quickly. Indra expressed confusion about their fear of the drink, but Rodolfo insisted they would soon find out. He told Indra to open Santa's mouth, which he did, and Rodolfo poured the smoothie down his throat. Suddenly, Santa's body turned bright red. Rodolfo urged everyone to run as fast as they could. Indra was about to speak but was swept up by Issei, and they jumped out the window, followed by Rodolfo. Santa let out a loud roar, and the group ran as fast as they could. Issei urged his legs to keep moving, while Indra's weight became a concern. Santa's voice echoed, expressing his discomfort. They continued to flee until a massive explosion erupted, visible even from space. The group, believing they were at a safe distance, was thrown by the shockwave, causing a small earthquake and triggering a snow avalanche toward them. Braum warned everyone about the incoming avalanche, and they could only exclaim their dismay before being buried in snow. Once the avalanche settled, a hand emerged from the snow. It was Issei, who had used his magic to create a protective dome that shielded most of them. However, the Soviet remained stuck atop a tree, alongside a snowman resembling Indra. Issei checked on everyone, confirming there were no injuries. Buddha found the experience amusing and suggested they do it again. Rodolfo expressed his disdain for preparing the smoothie. Braum decided to help the Soviet down from the tree, while Lenin called for assistance, fearing the heights. Issei suggested they find Santa and ask him what had happened. Suddenly, he had to dodge as a falling elf landed where he had just stood. Braum commented on the unusual sight of elves raining down. Issei lamented his chaotic life, wishing for peace at home instead of these wild adventures. Buddha urged Issei not to be melodramatic and to help him unearth Indra. The snowman version of Indra remained silent. Issei agreed to help, promising that afterward, they would seek out the Christmas bodybuilder. After the explosion and rescuing Indra from the snow, while bringing down a frightened Soviet from the top of a tree, the suicide squad was walking back to the explosion site. Rodolfo wondered if Issei thought anyone had survived the blast. Issei confidently stated that of course Santa would survive. After all, he was the muscular figure of Christmas who had gifted children a weight set and a guide on how to be strong and eat well the previous year. Indra realized that was why his children had become stronger and managed to work together to give him a balanced fight. Braum expressed his hope that his nephew was okay and hadn't been harmed. Lenin pointed out that he could see Santa in the distance. As they approached, they noticed Santa had lost his shirt, revealing his well-defined muscles, and he was facing away from them. Santa asked who had the idea to wake him up with that ultra-spicy shake. Everyone broke into a cold sweat, sensing the icy aura surrounding Santa's body. Rodolfo decided to be as honest as possible and, along with the others, pointed out that it was Issei's idea, and he had enjoyed it. Issei felt betrayed but was suddenly gripped by a strong hand on his shoulder. Santa confronted Issei, asking if it was his idea. Issei admitted it was, questioning what the problem was. Santa laughed ominously, explaining that the real problem was that Issei's brilliant idea had led to the destruction of his gift base, meaning there would be no presents this year. Consequently, Issei would be on Santa's naughty list, and even worse, on the darkest part of that list forever. Issei realized he had truly messed up. Santa clarified that messing up wasn't the word he would use, screwing up was much better. As punishment, Issei would have to repair all the damage caused by his idea before Christmas, with only 4 months left to do so, and he doubted a miracle would help him. Issei felt overwhelmed, but then a thought sparked joy within him, which displeased Santa. Santa questioned Issei's smile, asking if he found the situation amusing. Issei explained he wasn't laughing but planned to use one of his new abilities he had copied from a manga, hoping it would work. Stepping away from everyone, he channeled his power, enveloping himself in a red aura. Crossing his fingers, a massive cloud of smoke surrounded the area, temporarily blinding everyone. When the smoke cleared, Santa and the others dropped their jaws in shock. Before them stood thousands of issei clones, all sporting wild grins. Issei declared that this would be enough and instructed his clones that there was much to do in a short amount of time, so they should get to work. The clones posed like soldiers and began chopping down trees, mining iron and other minerals to smelt, while others repaired the explosion site. Issei noted that these clones would last a maximum of 2 months and demanded answers about what had happened, particularly why Santa had been encased in a pillar of ice. Santa, recovering from his shock, nodded but suggested they discuss it elsewhere. In Santa's secret base at the South Pole, Issei and the others were astonished by the number of bases Santa had. They followed him to a meeting room where they took their seats. Some elves entered, offering cookies and hot chocolate, which everyone gratefully accepted, enjoying their snack while waiting for Santa, who returned dressed in armor. Santa asked Issei what he wanted to know. Issei inquired about the situation, specifically why they had seen so many frozen figures and why Santa and his elves were trapped in ice. Santa explained that the cause of all this and a potential ice age was his eldest daughter, Elsa. Issei asked why Elsa was doing this and what she wanted. Santa revealed something disturbing. Elsa was obsessed with Issei, her room filled with pictures of him, all declaring he should belong to her and not anyone else. Issei realized Santa was referring to his wife. Santa continued, explaining that when Elsa learned of her death and that Issei had a child, her desire intensified as she wanted to be the mother of Issei's child. Upon discovering this, Santa had to seal Elsa's powers and confine her, but he hadn't anticipated one thing. Richtofen asked what that was. Santa explained that Elsa was being used by the primordial of ice, an ancient monster his ancestor had defeated long ago not by killing it, but by sealing it deep within the earth. The creature was using Elsa to break free, as only their blood could shatter the seal. Suddenly, Issei's swords began to radiate warmth, and Santa, noticing the similar power, stood up and looked at Issei's swords with curiosity. Santa asked if Issei's swords were infused with the primordial power of the elemental fire. Issei confirmed this and inquired why it mattered. Santa explained that this meant Issei had been chosen by her to become her champion, signaling that dark times were approaching. Meanwhile, in a hidden part of Antarctica, Elsa was filled with joy, believing her beloved would soon be by her side, belonging only to her. In another part of the castle, deep within, a massive monster, 50 meters tall, sensed the energy of his sister. The primordial of ice realized that his sister had chosen her champion, but that was of little concern to him. Soon, the world would become a glacier, and he would reign as he always should have, laughing at the thought that the girl believed she had control over him. On a path, the blonde transformed his spear into a pillow and followed the light. At the summit of a mountain, an elderly man was levitating in a meditative position. He opened his eyes calmly, and a strong gust of wind swept through the area. The elder sensed that the time had come to gather and confront the threat once more. Rising to his feet and making a few swift movements, he launched himself off the mountain like a bullet. Issei reflected on the 4 primordial beings who controlled the basic elements, noting that he possessed the elemental powers of fire and lightning. He admitted that he was unaware of the locations of the others and whether they were allies or foes. He turned to Santa, asking how they could defeat the creature causing chaos. Santa explained that there were only 2 options: seal it again or eliminate it. Issei believed sealing it was not a viable option, and that defeating it would prevent future wars. With that, everyone prepared to return and commence the meeting that would determine the fate of the world. In the underworld, all of Issei's former wives and interests were engaged in a discussion about a certain woman named Maria. On the day of the meeting, leaders from various factions and pantheons gathered in one place. The demon leaders included Surzek, Ajuka, Falbium, Seraphol, and the Gremory, Citri, Phoenix, and Agar's factions. The fallen angels were represented by Azazel, Valerie, Penemu, Barakiel, and several soldiers. Among the angels were Michael, Gabriel, Dulio, Mael, Jesus, and Maria, who held a peacefully sleeping Zuko in her arms. The yokai included Yasaka with her daughter, and a red-haired man with fox ears, who had a small blonde fox sleeping on him, his grandson. The dragons present were Ophis, Draig, and Tannen. From Asgard came Loki, Freya, Frigg, Heimdall, and their soldiers. Other pantheon leaders included Zeus, Susanoo, Are, Mictlantecutli, and others. While most leaders were present, the representative from the Hindu pantheon and Issei with his allies were still missing. Suddenly, the doors opened, revealing a man in damaged Spartan armor, whose identity was unknown to many. Surzek inquired about the man's identity. Issei remarked on Surzeka's reputation for intelligence, while Rias recognized his voice and called out to him. Issei confirmed his identity but stated that only those he trusted could call him by that name. The women lowered their heads in sadness. Azazel asked about the individuals accompanying Issei, who introduced them one by one, surprising everyone as some were legends and others were historical figures. Issei first introduced his friend, the eccentric weapons enthusiast and party lover, Lenin, the leader of the former Soviet Union. Lenin greeted everyone, expressing his hope that nothing foolish would occur during the meeting, or he would fill them with lead. Most nodded, though some were indifferent to his threat. Next, Issei introduced Edward Richtofen, a brilliant friend capable of creating a particle accelerator from scrap. Richtofen greeted the group, introducing himself as a doctor and professor, but preferred to be called Richtofen by friends, boasting of his destructive capabilities. Issei then introduced Rodolfo, who simply said hello. Following him was Braum, a powerful giant and an old friend, who greeted everyone with a hearty laugh. Issei presented Indra, the god of battles, and Buddha, the sweet-loving deity. Buddha cheerfully greeted everyone, particularly Zeus, who expressed annoyance at being called a certain name. Indra provocatively claimed that none present were worthy of a fair fight, which offended some and amused others. Issei introduced Santa Claus, who humorously noted that most of those present were on his naughty list and would receive coal for Christmas, while the well-behaved would receive gifts. Reactions varied, with some pleased and others disheartened by their impending fate. Finally, Issei introduced himself as the human primordial and champion of fire and lightning. Zeus offered Issei a gift, originally intended for his son, but deemed him unworthy. As Issei accepted, lightning surrounded him, transforming his armor into a more comfortable and formidable version. Everyone admired his new appearance, which exuded strength and authority. Issei expressed gratitude to Zeus for the gift, vowing to wear it with honor. He then stood alongside his friends, declaring their unity as a team. With everyone finally gathered, they were ready to begin the meeting and decide on their course of action, as war loomed on the horizon. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the world, an elderly man and a blonde were making their way to the location of the Champion of Fire. The leaders were seated in their designated places, all eyes focused on Issei, who sat with a cheerful Maria on his lap and a sleeping Zuko in his arms, sking his thumb. Many women in the room felt a pang of jealousy, while some younger girls glared at Maria for taking their favorite seat. Maria expressed to Issei how lonely she had felt and how much both she and Zuko missed him, playfully tracing circles on his armor. Lenin teased Issei about being intimidated by a woman, to which Issei retorted, annoyed that Lenin could read his thoughts. Lenin claimed he had no such ability, but since Issei had revealed his feelings, he had hit the mark. Issei expressed his disdain for Lenin, calling him a vodka-loving Soviet. The room fell silent as the tension escalated. Claus addressed the gathering, emphasizing the gravity of their situation. He explained that they were facing an ancient and powerful being of ice, the primordial elemental of cold, which had been sealed away for millennia. Unfortunately, it had been released by his daughter, who was now under the creature's influence. Surzek inquired if there was a way to defeat this formidable foe. Claus confirmed that there was a method, but it was fraught with danger. They would need to not only defeat the creature but also seal its essence within an object before destroying its physical form forever. Azazel then asked what object they would use for the sealing. Claus produced a gem from his waist and placed it on the table, indicating it was the key to their plan. They decided to use that plan, but the question remained, how would they get close to him? Claus pointed to Issei, suggesting he would be the bait. Issei questioned why he was chosen instead of one of them. Lenin explained that Issei was attractive and drew women to him like a magnet. Richtofen added that Issei was perfect for this task because he could be quite stubborn. Claus remarked that Issei was immature and often found himself on the naughty list. Braum remained silent, having nothing to contribute. Issei felt a wave of sadness wash over him, realizing that his friends viewed him merely as a pawn. He remained quiet while Maria comforted him. She reassured Issei that he was not an object or a tool, he was himself, and that was what she liked about him. She hugged him tightly, resembling a koala, which elicited a mischievous laugh from her that caught the attention of everyone present, sparking jealousy among the women. A group of annoyed women approached the couple, and Issei frowned in irritation. The Gremory group demanded that Maria let go of their Issei. Maria refused, insisting that she was comfortable and that they should go elsewhere since the adults were talking. She tightened her grip on Issei, making it clear she wasn't letting go. Issei warned them to leave his sight or they would feel his wrath. The swords on his back glimmered ominously, causing the women to back away, heads down and somewhat saddened, knowing Issei still held resentment toward them. Issei addressed the leaders, asking if they would join the battle or simply stand by and watch their people suffer. Michael declared his willingness to fight, not wanting to see his brothers and sisters perish out of cowardice. Loki affirmed his support, grateful to Issei for helping him change his ways and abandon the foolish idea of starting Ragnarok. Zeus asked if Olympus would participate, and both Poseidon and Hades nodded in agreement with their brother. Surzek observed the acceptance of the plan but noticed his sister's sadness, revealing his protective side. Issei asked Surzek if he would join them. Surzek hesitated, stating he wouldn't join unless Issei apologized to the girls and his sister. Issei clenched his fists in anger, but Maria took his hand, calming him down. Azazel echoed Surzek's sentiment, refusing to join. Shiva also declined, stating that neither he nor his brothers would assist. Issei turned to the dragon gods, inquiring if they would join. None responded, indicating their unwillingness to fight. Issei challenged those with honor to follow him, while those who chose to stay behind were labeled as cowards. The meeting concluded, with most leaving, while a few remained, signaling their refusal to fight. Once outside, Issei noticed a small group of demons approaching, and among them was Serorg, who activated his balance break and knelt before Issei, as did the others. Issei questioned the meaning of their actions. Serorg expressed his desire to fight alongside Issei, hoping to redeem himself for past mistakes, and acknowledged that while their numbers were few, they were willing to battle. Issei warned him that this would mark him as a traitor. Serorg insisted he wouldn't stand idly by while his cowardly cousin did nothing, and others felt the same way. Issei proposed a sparring match to gauge Serorg's progress. Serorg agreed, but before he could finish his sentence, Issei sent him flying with a punch, handing his child to Maria before jumping after Serorg. Maria hoped her dear Sukido wouldn't become a delinquent like his father, who preferred to solve problems with his fists. In a desolate field, Issei landed and scanned for his opponent. Suddenly, the ground trembled as he crossed his arms, blocking a powerful strike that pushed him back several meters. Issei complimented Serorg on his strength. Serorg admitted that the blow had broken 3 of his ribs, but thanks to a phoenix tear he had saved, he wasn't too fatigued from the pain. Issei asked how Serorg wanted to fight. Serorg replied he wanted to rely solely on strength. Just then, someone intervened between them. Indra expressed his desire to fight, stating he hadn't given his all in their previous encounter. Braum also wanted to join, surprising the 3 with their sudden arrival. Claus eagerly anticipated the chance to confront Issei for destroying his gift factory. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades declared they too would fight, eager to see how much their friend had improved. Loki joined in, expressing his interest as well. Issei proposed a temporary truce to Serorg, who agreed. They positioned themselves back to back, ready to face their opponents. Together, they declared that it would be all of them against the two of them, challenging their adversaries to prepare for the fight of their lives. Issei and Serorg found themselves completely surrounded by powerful opponents, and this friendly battle was about to escalate dramatically. Issei questioned Serorg's ability to handle the situation, while Serorg wondered if Issei could take them all on alone. They noticed their adversaries cracking their knuckles and removing their weapons, leaving them embedded in the ground. Shiva announced that this would be a fight of pure strength, with no weapons, magic, or dirty tricks allowed. Everyone agreed. As Buddha approached, he took his place beside them, stating that he would join them because he knew the strength of his friend and didn't want to taste defeat again. Issei recalled the day he had bested Buddha for eating his special treats meant for his beloved. Buddha winced at the memory of their weapons breaking during that encounter. Serorg interrupted their banter, reminding them that they were surrounded by gods, demigods, and beings of immense power. The trio quickly shifted their focus to their opponents, who were waiting for the signal to begin the battle. Issei then declared that they should fight without weapons, removing the chains from his arms and planting his swords into the ground. Buddha followed suit, leaving his special weapon embedded as well. Unbeknownst to them, the underworld news was filming from a distance, preparing to broadcast what promised to be an epic clash. The supernatural beings and humans alike were tuning in, including a family in a mansion with their grandchildren eagerly watching the events unfold. Mickey pointed out Issei on the screen, while Goro expressed hope for their son's forgiveness for past actions. Back in the arena, Issei suggested they split up to face their opponents, which Buddha agreed would create a more balanced fight. Serorg chose to take on Loki, Susanoo, and Braum, while Issei prepared to face Zeus, Hades, Poseidon, and Klaus. Buddha would take on Shiva, Hakuryuko, and Issei was momentarily confused by Valerie's intense gaze, who declared her intent to claim him after defeating him. With a serious expression, Issei decided to take on the challenge himself, instructing Buddha to handle the others. Without warning, Issei charged at his opponents, catching them off guard and dragging them away from the main group. Buddha and Serorg watched, intrigued by the unfolding events. Issei led his opponents to an open area, the ancient home of dragons. He asked who would be the first to fight, narrowly dodging a lightning bolt as Zeus stepped forward, eager to test Issei's strength now that he wielded godly power. Issei accepted the challenge, ready to see who was stronger, father or son. In an instant, they clashed, their fists colliding with such force that it created gusts of wind and tremors in the ground. Zeus remarked that while Issei was impressive, he sensed he was holding back and urged him to unleash his full power. Issei acknowledged this, feeling that Zeus was also not giving it his all, which frustrated him. An aura of lightning erupted from Issei, drawing the attention of the others who watched from a distance. Buddha noted that it had been a long time since he had seen Zeus unleash his full power, while Poseidon recalled that it had been ages since his brother had fought at such intensity. Back in the fight, Issei declared it was his turn to unleash his power, surprising everyone as he matched Zeus's strength. Zeus grinned, excited to engage fully with his son. They resumed their battle, their strikes generating powerful winds and causing destruction beneath them. Seizing an opening in Zeus's defense, Issei landed a blow that knocked the breath out of the thunder god, sending him crashing to the ground. However, before Issei could taunt him, Zeus seized him by the head and slammed him into the ground, burying him against a mountain. Zeus taunted Issei about eating dirt, but Issei emerged from the rubble with a battle cry, launching himself at Zeus and executing a move that pinned the god to the ground. Enraged, Zeus broke free and retaliated with a powerful punch, sending Issei flying. Without hesitation, he charged back, ready to strike again. Issei felt the sting of pain but remained determined to continue the fight. "What are you saying? This has just begun, and I was only using 60% of my base power." Zeus remarked that he had been giving his all at 90%. Issei suggested that they both give it their all and see who was physically stronger. With that, Both were enveloped in their auras and charged at each other, exchanging a flurry of punches and kicks that obliterated everything in their path while their spectators watched in awe. Hades noted that the young man had great potential that just needed refinement. Claus understood why his daughter desired him so much. He was quite the warrior. Valerie expressed her excitement, thinking about how strong issei was and how she couldn't wait to face him and make him hers while they danced. Hades and Claus stood at a distance from Valerie, who was giggling in a somewhat unsettling manner as she affectionately called out issei's name. Suddenly, they had to step aside as a battered Zeus fell to the ground, blood seeping from him, and one of his arms appeared injured. Zeus acknowledged issei's strength, saying he could see the potential for him to become a future god of war. Issei, however, was not in much better shape. He had a broken arm and blood trickled from his mouth, along with several bruises, but he paid no mind to the pain coursing through his body. He thanked his father for the compliment but clarified that his goal was not that. He simply wanted all of this to end and to return to his peaceful life with his son. Zeus understood but mentioned that if issei ever accepted the title, it would be his. As they stood facing each other, they began to laugh like madmen and resumed their relentless exchange of blows. Hades commented that the two had lost their minds, to which both Zeus and issei replied that they were simply having fun. Their laughter continued until, in a moment of carelessness, they both collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Claus found it hard to believe this was happening, while Hades suggested they heal their friends and wait for them to wake up to continue their battle. Thus, both he and Claus set about healing their companions. Meanwhile, a certain white-haired girl watched issei with longing and unholy desires. After the battle between issei and Zeus, both were seen fully recovered, and issei was ready for his next fight, which would be 1-against-2. Issei expressed his confidence, stating that Hades and Claus were about to receive the beating of their immortal lives. Claus warned issei not to get too cocky, reminding him that he still had a score to settle regarding his base. Issei pointed out that his clones were repairing it, but Claus dismissed that concern. Hades expressed his eagerness for a good fight, wanting to stretch his muscles. Issei proposed a bet, which intrigued both Hades and Claus. He suggested that if he won, Claus would remove him from his blacklist and owe him a favor. Claus agreed but added that if issei lost, he would have to be Claus's assistant throughout Christmas. Hades chimed in, stating that if issei lost, he would have to clean up after his dogs for eternity. Issei accepted the terms and asked how they would approach the fight. Claus decided to go first, eager to settle the score with issei. As Claus posed, showcasing his well-built physique, issei challenged him, ready to demonstrate the true strength of a man. The two charged at each other, exchanging powerful blows and kicks that created small energy waves, shaking the surroundings. Claus acknowledged issei's skills, noting that he hadn't lost his touch, while issei urged him to focus on the action. Taking advantage of Claus's momentary distraction, issei seized his beard and slammed him to the ground, spinning him around before releasing him, causing Claus to skid across the ground and leave a path of destruction. As issei confidently approached, he was suddenly caught off guard when two arms emerged from the ground, trapping his legs and pulling him down, leaving only his head exposed. Claus reveled in his victory, declaring that issei had fallen into his trap and that they would now play his favorite game. Claus stepped back and charged at issei, delivering a powerful kick that sent him flying, destroying 3 mountains in the process. Claus took a moment to enjoy a cigar, commenting on how issei had let his guard down, leading to his defeat. However, issei, slightly battered, appeared behind Claus unexpectedly. Before Claus could react, issei grabbed him and slammed him to the ground, landing several phantom punches that left Claus injured and spitting blood. As issei prepared to rise, he felt something heavy land on him, pushing him deeper into the ground. He unleashed a powerful attack, declaring it the burial stomp. Claus was left buried in a hole, his form barely visible. Issei then pointed at Hades, who was visibly annoyed by the nickname he had just received. Hades warned issei not to call him that. Issei continued to taunt Hades, joking about his appearance. Unable to tolerate the insults any longer, Hades delivered a powerful punch to issei's stomach, sending him crashing into a wall. Before Issei could recover, Hades appeared before him and unleashed a flurry of punches that shook the area. Hades challenged Issei to demonstrate the strength he had gained or admit to being afraid. Issei scoffed at the idea of fear. However, a kick to his jaw sent Issei crashing further into the wall, and Hades then grabbed his head, slamming it repeatedly into the ground, staining it with blood. Hades questioned Issei's strength, asking what he would do if something happened to his son. Issei warned Hades not to mention his child, or he would face his wrath. Hades taunted him, suggesting that he was playing with something that wasn't his and that his son might one day suffer because of his weakness. Issei broke free from Hades's grip and retaliated with an elbow strike that caught Hades off guard. Hades smiled, pleased that his plan had angered Issei. He declared that Issei was still weak and would never be able to protect his loved ones. Issei demanded silence and charged at Hades, who prepared for another round of combat. The two exchanged blows again, but in a moment of carelessness, Hades received a punch to his side that sent him stumbling back. Issei declared that it would end now, preparing for a final attack. Hades challenged him to come and prove it. Both fighters charged at each other, gripping hands and exerting pressure, releasing small energy waves as the ground beneath them began to crack. Realizing he couldn't use his hands effectively, Issei opted for a headbutt, striking Hades in the face. This momentary distraction allowed Issei to execute his finishing move. The scream echoed across the battlefield, sending a chill down the spines of those who heard it as they clung to their friend. Issei, determined to finish the fight, prepared to unleash a new attack he had learned from a video game, declaring it would take him to infinity and beyond. After executing the move, he collapsed to the ground, feeling sore and exhausted. Just then, he was knocked down by a silver-haired girl who appeared eager for action. Valerie, finally getting her chance, was confident that Issei would enjoy what was about to happen. Issei struggled, asking her to let him go, but she ignored his pleas and began to remove her clothing, undeterred by the presence of others. Issei, fatigued and injured, found it difficult to escape her grasp. As Valerie stood there, ready to take things further, a figure resembling Hades suddenly fell from the sky, knocked out and creating a cloud of smoke. Valerie inhaled the smoke and sneezed, causing a swirling mist to envelop her. Issei was frozen in shock, his eyes wide, while Zeus, who was about to intervene, also found himself unable to move. Claus, just regaining consciousness, fainted at the sight before him. Above Issei, a slightly blushing and exposed Valley hovered, leaving him overwhelmed and unable to respond. After battling against his opponents Claus and Hades, Issei was suddenly caught by Valerie, one of the many women who had betrayed him in the past. However, unexpectedly as she inhaled some dust, she was surrounded by light, and in her place appeared Valley. It was then that everything clicked for Issei. Sometimes he saw one of them and other times the other, but he had never seen them together in any meeting or mission when he was still part of the supernatural world. With this revelation, his mind could take no more, and he fell unconscious. He realized that all this time, in every moment, in every place, they had always been together. They were the same person in one body. He discovered this in the worst way possible, almost violated by both of them, which meant that both Valley and Valerie were the same. They were a hermaphrodite. Issei floated in his mind while facing his emotions, which were completely altered, except for anger, boredom, and indifference. Joy lay on the ground, sking his thumb, completely out of it. Disgust was retching into a bottomless bucket, his face turning green at the images flooding his mind. Anxiety was in a corner, repeating that this was just a dream. Anger remained serious, arms crossed, indifferent to everything. Boredom was similar to anger but was affected slightly. Indifference didn't care about anything at all. Issei appeared serious, but his face told another story. Love was still locked away in his room. Issei felt overwhelmed, filled with rage, confusion, and a bit of disappointment for never being told the truth. He had been deceived, as only one of them would show up during missions, never both. For the first time, laziness was seen doing something other than sleeping. He was comforting generosity, who lay on the ground crying, feeling as if everything around them was an illusion. Courage sat in a chair receiving therapy from Pride, who was also getting some psychological help from Honesty, who was assisting Lust. Issei's mind was a battlefield, and he didn't know how long it would take for his emotions to recover from this shocking revelation. Outside Issei's mind, he lay on the ground with his head resting on Vale's lap, who was now dressed in feminine clothing. Vale expressed how much they both missed him, recalling the day they met when he was weak and she was arrogant until he managed to defeat her. During their second encounter, when he fought against Loki, her female counterpart desired him, but she had been indifferent. Gradually, her feminine side began to affect her, and each time she saw him, she felt a blush as he grew stronger over time. One day, he met her female side, and it made her happy to see how he always protected her, which began to build trust between them. After defeating the Chaos Brigade and sealing the Trihexa again, Issei fell unconscious from the strain of using all his power. While he remained in bed, they visited him to check on his condition and waited for the moment he would awaken to share their secret. However, they ended up ruining everything. While he slept, the girls had a ridiculous idea to gain experience to please him better, which led them to start dating other people. Gradually, they began to forget about him until one day he woke up, and they, like hypocrites, went to see him, hiding the auras and essences of other men on their bodies. Vale recalled a day when Valerie was about to do something with Red, and at that moment, she felt Issei's presence and managed to stop Valerie just in time, telling her that he saw her, which caused doubt in her heart about what she was about to do. When Valerie tried to find him, she could never locate him until one day he arrived, and a completely different aura emanated from him. It was an aura of pure indifference, anger, and boredom directed toward them. When he made them sign a paper, Vale insisted that Valerie read it completely, but she refused, and that was the last time they saw him. When they learned how he was abandoning the supernatural, they didn't pay much attention to it, as they were happy with their boyfriends. Then one day, their older sister Anastasia arrived, revealing her entire plan, which broke the hearts of all the girls upon learning what they had done. It was a difficult time for everyone, as the girls began to decline. When they discovered they were PRGNT, their fear, anxiety, panic, and agony increased. Some chose to abort, while others decided to give birth only to abandon their children in an orphanage or mistreat them, blaming them for being born. Everything slowly fell apart, and they thought it would all end. But a ray of hope appeared when they managed to find him. Valerie was very happy, as were the others, but when they reunited, they discovered that he had already built a life and had a child. Upon learning that he was no longer pure, Valerie entered a state of total denial, thinking that the child was adopted and that he was still faithful and pure. However, when they felt his energy in the child, their fears became real, and everything broke down. A twisted idea was born in her mind: to become his wife and the mother of his child, to finally have what she always wanted, a family. As she reached out to caress his hair and gazed at his deliciously tempting lips, she moved dangerously close to him, intending to kiss him. Vala declared that she would demonstrate all the love she still felt for him. Just as she was about to connect their lips, she received a powerful kick to the face that sent her flying away from Issei. Maria instructed Zeus to hold her grandson, as she had matters to attend to. Zeus was about to say something but, seeing Maria's murderous glare, said nothing and took Issei in his arms, preparing to enter the hole where an unconscious Noelle lay. He sensed that trouble was about to ensue. On that side, she became serious. A surge of power was felt, and from the rubble emerged a white armor with blue accents. Valley expressed his frustration, feeling that their romantic moment had been interrupted. Maria, disgusted, declared that she would not allow an abomination like him to harm Issei. Valley reminded her of the suffering they endured upon learning of his departure, and now that they had him back, she wanted to keep them apart. Maria vowed to always be there for Issei, no matter how many times it took. Valley, angered, declared that she would now feel the power of a celestial. Maria, unfazed, reminded him of her past, when she was feared by all for being the only one capable of challenging a god. A magical circle appeared beneath her as Mael and Jesus watched the unfolding events from a distance. Jesus noted that his mother was about to use her power again, and Mael, curious, asked what exactly she would use. Jesus explained that his mother had a nickname given to her by her enemies, the Punisher of Sinners. A great light illuminated the area, and as it faded, everyone present felt a tremendous sacred power emanating from one source. They were curious about the energy's owner but were preoccupied with their own battles against adversaries who miraculously remained standing. Maria proclaimed her strength as the most powerful archangel. Vala dismissed her words and charged at her, leading to a fierce battle where Maria held the advantage. Her power acted as a repellent against demons, while Vali was part demon, part dragon, and part human, yet he continued to fight. Maria sensed that her opponent had no intention of surrendering, so she increased her power and unleashed a flurry of punches against Vali, who could only defend himself. She taunted him, expressing pity for his current state, once a powerful warrior now reduced to a mere shell. Vali, enraged, increased his power and activated his Diabolos dragon form, catching Maria off guard. He landed a powerful left hook to her abdomen, sending her crashing to the ground. Before she could rise, Vali appeared above her, energy gathering in his hand, declaring his intent to finish her off. An explosion erupted as he struck her, and when the smoke cleared, Maria was seen with her armor slightly damaged and her sword shattered before her. Unsatisfied, Vali prepared another attack, determined to end her. Maria, indignant, reminded him that the use of magic was prohibited. Vala declared this would be an exception and taunted her about taking care of Issei while she ceased to exist. Maria, refusing to be defeated easily, stood up with what little energy she had left and charged at him, managing to dent his armor. Vali retaliated by using his power to divide, siphoning half of Maria's strength, but in doing so, he began to bleed due to the sacred power acting as poison to him. Maria seized the opportunity and leaped at him, her fists surrounded by sacred energy, striking him with great force and gradually destroying his armor. Vali, weakened by the sacred power, was unable to defend himself. Maria declared that with her final attack, she would leave him unconscious. She raised her hands, ready to deliver the finishing blow, but just then, a green energy attack struck her, pushing her away from Vali. She recognized the red armor and the familiar crimson hair, which only fueled her anger. Rias appeared, concerned for Vali. He questioned her presence, and she assured him she was there to help. She tossed him a phoenix tear, which he consumed without hesitation, restoring his strength and repairing his armor. Both celestial dragon bearers observed their opponent, who looked irritated and somewhat fatigued. Maria, furious, scolded Rias for interfering in their fight. Rias stood her ground, refusing to let someone like Maria take what belonged to them by right, noting that Maria looked too exhausted to continue fighting. Maria scoffed at their threats, asserting that they were just a bunch of children who knew nothing of love. She claimed to feel pure love for Issei and would not allow a group of girls to harm him again. As she repaired her armor, she knelt to pray, leaving her opponents and onlookers confused, but Jesus understood what she was doing. He warned Mael that this was bad, as Maria was about to use something forbidden. After finishing her prayer, a massive magical circle opened high in the underworld sky, visible to all. Maria raised her hand, and a beam of light shot upward, creating a dome of energy that began to heal her wounds and restore her energy. Once the dome disappeared, something began to fall rapidly, embedding itself in the ground. As Maria grasped the spear, a powerful surge of energy erupted, accompanied by a chilling, maniacal laughter that froze the blood of everyone present. Maria reveled in her newfound freedom after so long, declaring that her enemies would soon feel her wrath. Jesus had anticipated this turn of events, while Mael questioned why Maria was speaking in such a manner. Jesus explained that when she wielded the spear, her personality shifted to a more sadistic and battle-hungry state, which was why she had been sealed away to prevent her from returning to that form. But now, it seemed she had broken the seal. After nearly 2,000 years, Maria could finally be herself again, thanks to the two of them, and as a reward for their liberation, she intended to take them down slowly and painfully. Her armor transformed into a deep navy blue, radiating immense power. Maria challenged them to entertain her for a while, but warned them not to die too quickly. In another part of a crater, Zeus appeared somewhat anxious, while Suko was crying, Claus was still asleep, and Issei was still unconscious. Suddenly, Issei began to open his eyes, first noticing the whimpers of his son. With a swift motion, he scooped Suko into his arms, gently rocking him and singing a lullaby, successfully calming him back to sleep. Issei then turned to Zeus, asking what had just happened. Zeus gestured toward a distant scene, urging Issei to see for himself. Issei looked in the direction indicated and witnessed Maria fiercely battling her two opponents with a brutal intensity. Concerned, Issei asked what had happened to Maria. Zeus explained that she had entered a frenzied state and would not stop until her opponents ceased to breathe. Issei felt compelled to intervene, insisting that this was not like Maria. He handed Suko back to Zeus and dashed off to stop her before it was too late. On the battlefield, Rias lay defeated, her armor shattered and missing an arm, a grim result of Maria's merciless attack. Maria, with most of her armor destroyed, seemed unfazed as she stood over Rias, who was on the ground, desperately trying to fend off a spear that was dangerously close to piercing her heart. Maria growled in frustration, demanding Rias to die and stop interfering in her beloved's life. Vale, despite his dire situation, declared that he would not allow Maria to kill him, as he still needed to resolve things with Issei. Hearing Vale's words only fueled Maria's rage, and she pressed the spear deeper, causing Vale to cry out in pain. Just then, Issei rushed in from behind, wrapping his arms around Maria and whispering in her ear to stop, insisting that this was not who she was. Maria struggled, insisting that she was about to finish her opponent. Issei pleaded with her to remember who she truly was, to return to the woman he was falling in love with. His heartfelt words reached her, and she paused, turning to face him. In a moment of clarity, she cupped his face and kissed him deeply, expressing all her love before resting her head against his strong chest. Maria then asked Issei to take her home. He lifted her in a bridal carry and turned to leave, but suddenly, someone grabbed his ankle, preventing him from moving. It was Vale who called out to him, wanting to speak. In response, Issei, filled with anger, kicked Vale's head away. He declared that there was nothing left to discuss and walked away, heading toward his friends, leaving a pained Vale behind, who could only watch as Issei faded from view, eventually losing consciousness. Issei could be seen carrying Maria in a bridal style as they approached Zeus, who was holding his adopted grandson. Once in front of Zeus, Issei carefully lowered Maria and extended his arms toward the god, who understood the gesture and handed over the sleeping child. Issei suggested that they should gather the others to check on their condition. Zeus agreed with the idea. Issei took the still sleeping Claus and the unconscious Hades from Zeus, and they returned to the others. Upon arrival, they found Buddha looking exhausted, his clothes in tatters, and Serorg without his armor and visibly injured. Issei asked the group how their training had gone. Buddha complained about the state of his expensive clothes from Dubai, while Issei urged him to stop being dramatic and asked where Braum was. Serorg pointed behind him, revealing Braum stuck in a wall, shield and all. Issei decided not to question how Braum ended up that way and asked about the others. Buddha gestured to a pile of defeated fighters, with Indra humorously trapped inside a jar. Issei was incredulous and asked if Buddha had used the Mafuba technique to contain Indra. Buddha explained that Indra had provoked him by threatening to confiscate his sweets, which he felt deserved a response. Issei joked about Buddha's obsession with sweets, comparing it to that of a child. Serorg then asked what they should do with all the defeated fighters. Issei, with a wild grin that sent shivers down both their spines, claimed to have a solution. 30 minutes later, Maria expressed concern about Issei's plan, questioning whether it was too extreme. Issei reassured her that taking risks was necessary and that nothing bad would happen since they were tough. Serorg confirmed that Buddha was in position and just needed to give the order to fire. Issei acknowledged this, but Serorg hesitated, asking if it was wise to use the fighters as ammunition. Issei confidently stated that everything was calculated and nothing could go wrong. Serorg reluctantly accepted this. What was really happening was that Issei, along with everyone else, was inside a giant sphere, preparing to launch them with a massive slingshot. Issei expressed his curiosity about what it would feel like to play Angry Birds in real life. In the distance, Buddha was getting ready for the moment Issei would fire. Buddha instructed Serorg to tell Issei he could shoot. Serorg relayed the message, and Issei declared that he was ready to take revenge for earlier, pulling back the enormous rubber band with the giant human sphere. Indra, confused and unable to move, demanded to be freed, but Issei, with a cheerful smile, was about to unleash his plan. Indra cursed him, but Issei was determined, saying he had always wanted to do this, and then released the rubber band, launching the massive sphere. Forward. The sphere soared toward a magical circle Buddha had created, aimed at the women's restroom in Asgard, owned by the Valkyries. Buddha warned Issei that when the fighters recovered, they would come for him. Issei boldly stated he was not afraid. As the group of friends began to leave the area, they carried their teammates, the Papio-Mygos, who were still asleep. Meanwhile, in Asgard, in the territory of the Valkyries, in a place where no man was allowed to enter, all the female warriors were enjoying a bath, unaware of the chaos about to unfold. Suddenly, an unknown object crashed into the lake, revealing itself to be the gods engaged in a fierce battle. Indra realized the gravity of the situation and decided he needed to escape. However, he was struck in the back by an arrow, courtesy of the leader of the Valkyries, who was far from pleased. Freya declared that men were forbidden in this sacred space, and for breaking that rule, they would be hunted. Indra, sensing the danger, attempted to create a teleportation circle, but it shattered. Freya informed him that this place was protected by a special seal preventing men like him from escaping, and he better run because the hunt would begin soon. As he watched the warriors disperse, Indra knew he had only a few minutes to gather his friends and hide from them. He vowed that Issei would pay for this predicament. Meanwhile, Issei and his allies were resting after a grueling battle. Issei was chatting with his father, Zeus, while Rodolfo continued to sleep. Claus was drawing on his uncle's face, who was snoring loudly. Richtifem was checking Lenin's injured body, Hades remained unconscious, Buddha was enjoying some sweets, and Serorg was bandaging his wounds. Maria was happily feeding little Zuko, who was overjoyed. Issei expressed his envy, and Zeus teased him about being jealous of the affection his son was receiving. Issei quickly shifted the topic, asking for ideas on how to infiltrate his daughter's castle. Claus presented 3 options: stealthily entering without being detected, going in guns blazing, or using Issei as a bargaining chip. Issei lamented his misfortune and opted for the first option. Claus complained that it took the fun out of life, as he had the perfect gift idea for Issei. Maria, overhearing this, had an impure thought. In her dream, she was filled with joy on Christmas morning, seeing a large gift. When she opened it, she found Issei tied up with gift ribbon and a GG in his mouth, completely exposed, with mistletoe covering him. Waking from the dream, Maria wore a mischievous expression, stifling small gasps at the thought. Issei, nearby, felt a chill and moved away slightly. Claus then revealed the holographic plans of the castle by tossing a snowball that transformed into a projector, displaying the castle's layout and its defenses. Issei noted the 8 sentinel towers, 100,000 ice soldiers, 50,000 ice monsters, 20,000 wyverns, a massive wall 100 meters high, and the frigid temperature of -500 degrees. Richtifem proposed a strategy to defeat them, but it would take time and require a team to accompany him. Lenin volunteered to join, and Zeus offered his assistance as well. Richtifem asked Issei if he would come along, but Issei declined, stating he had matters to attend to first. Serorg then stepped in, saying he would go in Issei's place. Richtifem handed out papers and maps, indicating the locations where they could find the necessary components for their plan. An incredible weapon capable of aiding them in the potential war looming on the horizon was at stake. Claus expressed his concern, realizing the urgency of their situation. Issei, ever the optimist, reassured him, explaining that there were still 22 days until Christmas and he wasn't sure if his beloved base would be ready in time. Issei, however, dismissed Claus's worries, confidently stating that the base had been completely repaired. Claus questioned how he could trust that, given that only 2 days had passed since its destruction, which he attributed to Issei's actions. Issei reminded Claus of his clones, which sparked a memory that brought a smile to his face. He shared the good news that the base was not only finished but also as good as new. Claus was incredulous, insisting that even if Issei's clones had worked tirelessly, they couldn't have accomplished such a feat in less than 2 days. Issei encouraged Claus to believe in his construction skills, showcasing a magical circle that revealed the new Santa's base. Claus was astonished, unable to comprehend how it was possible. Issei urged him never to doubt the power of his clones, claiming that Claus now owed him a huge favor. Claus decided to remove Issei from his naughty list and erase his record of mischief. Issei wore a grin that resembled that of a villain who had just achieved a significant victory, leaving everyone around him surprised by his expression. Issei was sitting at home, playing with his son when suddenly the door burst open, revealing Claus, who looked a bit tired. Issei asked what was wrong and suggested that Claus should at least knock before entering. Claus explained that it was Christmas and he had many deliveries to make, but he was still feeling weak after a recent fight with Braum. Issei wondered why Claus was there instead of resting at his own home. Claus had come to collect a small debt Issei owed him, magically transforming into Santa Claus and telling Issei it was time to repay that debt. Issei expressed concern about who would take care of his little one while he was away. Just then, a magical circle appeared, and Maria happily emerged, taking the baby Suko in her arms and disappearing from sight. Issei realized Claus had everything planned out. He then asked for the list of good children, which Claus provided, assuring Issei that he would help by dealing with the naughty kids while Issei delivered gifts to the good ones. Issei questioned whether he would need to use Claus's sleigh, to which Claus confirmed, mentioning that Rofoldo and his younger brother Red were waiting outside. They stepped out, and Issei saw the enormous sleigh with a giant bag, as his friends checked the straps. Claus outlined the plan. Issei's job was to leave a gift for every well-behaved child and not to forget to eat the cookies and drink the milk. Issei acknowledged the task, and Claus revealed a motorcycle from a keychain, urging them to get to work since the gifts wouldn't deliver themselves. Issei nodded and climbed onto the sleigh, taking off toward his objectives. While he delivered gifts and cookies with milk, Claus was busy delivering presents filled with coal to the homes of naughty children, joyfully proclaiming his love for his job. Meanwhile, Issei traveled the world, leaving gifts for those who had behaved well and providing free food. After several hours of delivering gifts, Issei accidentally entered a restricted area and found himself being pursued by 2 F-15 fighter jets. The pilots ordered him to stop and hand over the gifts, calling him a false Santa. Issei retorted that they would have to kiss him first if they thought he would stop quickly. The second pilot warned that if they couldn't persuade him nicely, they would do it the hard way. They opened fire, and Issei dodged as best he could, though some bullets struck the sleigh and the bag. Frustrated, Issei realized they were in serious trouble. Red shouted for him to use the armored mode. Hearing this, Issei spotted a large button labeled, "In case of danger, press the button." Without hesitation, he pressed it, and within moments, the sleigh transformed into a flying tank. The pilots were astonished, exclaiming about the flying tank. Issei admitted that Claus had style as he maneuvered the turret to fire back at the F-15s, successfully taking one down while the other pilot tried to evade the incoming fire. In a reckless move, the second pilot's aircraft was destroyed, forcing him to eject for his safety. Issei joyfully shouted Merry Christmas to everyone and wished them a prosperous New Year. Meanwhile, Richtofen led the group, as the locations on the map did not exist in their world. Lenin questioned how they were supposed to find everything if those places weren't real. Serorg pointed out that they needed a piece only found in transit, which he knew didn't exist. Richtofen explained that in his world, it did exist. Issei asked where Richtofen was from, assuming he was German based on his speech. Richtofen revealed he was indeed born in Germany, but not in this timeline. He was from an alternate reality where the Nazis, desperate to win, found a strange mineral that contaminated the entire world. He was the only one who escaped with the chronorium. Issei realized that Richtofen intended to send them to his world to retrieve the materials. Richtofen confirmed this, assuring them that the devices they had would beep when they were near the materials, allowing them to be transported back immediately once collected. Understanding the plan, the group headed toward the portal, bidding farewell as they set off in search of the materials. Issei decided to step out for a moment, sensing someone approaching with ill intentions. Richtofen offered to accompany him. The text provided is too short and does not contain enough content to apply the requested edits. Please provide a longer excerpt or additional context for me to work with. This is something I plan to resolve myself. Stepping out of the place and taking a deep breath, he jumped away far enough to reach a completely desolate area. With a serious expression, he declared that it was time for the coward to show himself, questioning if he was just a coward who only knew how to hide. But there was silence, and just as he was about to make a move, he had to dodge a rock that seemed to aim to crush him. He continued to evade more rocks until he grew tired of it and drew his swords, slicing through the stones with ease. He demanded the coward to reveal himself. Suddenly, the ground beneath him opened up, causing him to fall. However, with the swords of chaos, he managed to avoid plunging into the abyss and began to climb the wall, finally getting out. Taking a defensive stance, he scanned his surroundings and noticed a shadow above him. Looking up, he saw a young man seated atop a massive rock monster. He asked who the young man was and why he was being attacked. But instead of a response, he watched as the stranger raised a hand holding a staff, summoning a huge mass of rocks that floated above him. Before he could react, something bound his legs, immobilizing him, and he was ultimately crushed. The young man, seeing his target defeated, sighed with disappointment, as his opponent had turned out to be quite weak. On a nearby mountain, an old man who appeared to be meditating spoke up. He remarked that the young man had finished off his opponent. The young man jumped down to the elder's side and sighed, expressing that the bearer of the primordial fire was a weakling, and he had hoped for more fun. The elder noted that the young man seemed overly confident. The young man shrugged it off, stating that it was all over and they should leave. The elder, however, insisted that this was just the beginning. Confused by the elder's words, the young man was about to respond when a war cry echoed, and the ground erupted as Issei, filled with rage, emerged, ready to confront his opponent. The young man was taken aback by Issei's sudden appearance and exclaimed in disbelief at how quickly he had arrived. Issei, furious, struck the young man, sending him flying, and declared that the young man had no idea what he was dealing with. The young man, angered by the slap, vowed not to forgive Issei, but was quickly silenced by a kick to his jaw that sent him soaring through the air. Issei demanded to know who they were and why the young man had attacked him. The elder urged him to calm down and speak civilly, introducing himself as Silver, the bearer of the primordial air, and the young man as Gustav, the bearer of the primordial earth. Issei introduced himself as well, but suddenly a giant hand made of sand formed, attempting to capture him. He dodged just in time, and soon, a massive titan of sand and rock took shape, with Gustav atop its head, looking far from pleased. Gustav declared that Issei should consider himself dead. Issei noted that Gustav was always so arrogant. Silver commented that Gustav often got easily angered and lamented that a certain someone was not there to bring him down a notch. Issei inquired about this person, and Silver explained that she was the bearer of the primordial nature, who used a song to calm him. Issei understood that he would have to bring Gustav down by other means, cracking his knuckles with a determined look. Silver wished him luck as he leaped to a high rock, taking a meditative pose. Issei resolved to teach Gustav a lesson. With a fierce gaze directed at his adversary, he prepared for the battle ahead. Unlike Silver, who displayed manners, Issei had no patience for the young man's attitude. He cracked his knuckles, ready to see what Gustav was made of. Gustav, realizing he wouldn't have a chance in a direct confrontation, summoned an army of mini-rock golems. Issei remarked on Gustav's cowardice for using golems instead of fighting like a man. Gustav dismissed Issei's taunts and commanded the golems to attack. As they charged, Issei stood his ground. Silver suggested that Issei might want some help, but Issei assured him he would be fine, viewing the golems as a good warm-up to test his armor's combat resilience. He charged at the golems, delivering a powerful punch to the first, shattering it. He intercepted another with a kick, destroying it as well, and continued to take down the golems one by one. Gustav, frustrated, created more golems, but issei was using them merely as practice. Issei taunted Gustav, expressing disappointment in his abilities. Gustav, angered, struck his staff against the ground, summoning a massive golem of rock and metal. Seeing the colossal creature, issei only smiled wider and dashed toward it. The golem attempted to crush him, but he stopped its foot with sheer strength and hurled it to the ground. With a powerful leap, he dove down, destroying the golem's core. Gustav was in disbelief, and before he could react, issei appeared before him, delivering a punch that sent him flying. Not allowing Gustav to recover, issei kept attacking, treating him like a ping-pong ball, and finally combined his hands to create a massive blow that buried Gustav deep into the earth. Issei thought this would teach Gustav not to mess with him. However, the ground began to tremble beneath him, and from where Gustav had been, a gigantic colossus of rock emerged, towering high into the sky. Silver exclaimed that Gustav had activated the special ability granted to each elemental. Gustav had a determined look in his brown eyes, signaling that he had activated the elemental power of rock. Issei felt an intense heat enveloping his body, and in that moment he knew what he had to do. Gripping his swords, he assumed a combat stance. Silver observed the scene and remarked that this individual seemed unafraid of death. Maria confirmed that he was always like that, and Tiamat added that it was precisely why she loved him so much. Hearing their voices, Silver turned to see the newcomers and inquired about their identities. They introduced themselves as the future wives of the man with the killer face. Nearby, a small baby just a year old was nestled in a baby carrier, gazing at his father with admiration and giggling happily while clutching a little ball. In the midst of the battle, Issei charged toward the enormous creature that hurled massive rocks at him, which he skillfully dodged. However, the giant stomped the ground, causing sharp rock spikes to erupt with the intent to impale him. Issei swiftly cut through the spikes with his swords. Gaining momentum, he leaped high, planning to enter the giant and reach its core where his adversary resided. But before he could execute his plan, a hand emerged from the ground, capturing him and squeezing tightly, causing him to cry out in pain as he was thrown roughly to the ground. Nevertheless, he rose again and charged at the creature, which remained still. More spikes shot up from the ground, and while Issei continued to slice through them, one spike managed to pierce him, eliciting a gasp of concern from the onlookers. The sound of his cry awakened something deep within him, as he noticed Silver and his little one looking at him with tearful eyes. This stirred the primordial fire within him, enveloping his body in its power, allowing him to break free and heal rapidly. Gripping his swords tightly, he rushed toward the giant, severing one of its arms. Inside the golem, Gustav screamed in pain, feeling the loss of his connection to the giant, and in a fit of rage, he attempted to crush Issei. Surrounded by the elemental power, Issei struggled to breathe as his body adjusted to the energy coursing through him. Seeing the giant prepare to stomp on him, he ignited his swords with fire and managed to cut off one of the giant's legs, causing it to roar in agony. Determined, Issei decided it was time to unleash his ultimate weapon. He placed his swords on his back and summoned a golden spear from a magical circle, executing a series of professional movements. He recalled how he had never used this weapon after defeating a fairy and stripping her of her abilities, but now he was eager to see its true potential. With a powerful incantation, the spear emitted a golden glow, transforming into thousands of floating daggers that surrounded Issei before he sent them hurtling toward the giant, slicing it in the process. Gustav felt the mental anguish of being cut, even though it was not physical, yet he endured it. Issei commanded the daggers to return, merging them back into the spear, which grew to an enormous size. He grasped it firmly and hurled it with all his strength, piercing the giant's chest and exposing its core, where he spotted Gustav inside. Racing toward the giant, Issei leaped and, channeling Haki into his fist to harden it, delivered a powerful punch to the giant's chest, causing Gustav to cough up blood and fall unconscious. As the giant no longer felt its creator within, it began to crumble, returning to rubble. The spectators watched anxiously through the smoke, but soon they saw a shadow approaching. It was Issei, carrying the unconscious Gustav like a sack of potatoes, with the spear resting on his other shoulder. He remarked that it had been a good warm-up and that he would take a moment to rest. He collapsed to the ground, utterly exhausted from the sudden surge of power he had yet to fully master. Feeling something climb onto his chest, he looked down to see his little one, who appeared worried about him. He gently stroked the child's hair and smiled. The baby, Suko, content that his father was okay, decided to fall asleep on his father's armored chest. Issei continued to caress his head, filled with happiness at being reunited with his son, creating a serene atmosphere. Maria and Tiamat watched the tender interaction between father and son, commenting on how cute it was. Silver noted that this young man had yet to master his power, which was crucial in preventing the primordial of ice from achieving its goal of plunging the world into eternal frost. Meanwhile, in Latin America, a group of people joyfully shouted about a snowball fight, playfully tossing snowballs while dressed in shorts and shirts. Having adapted to the cool weather,